Hello, everyone. Good day to you all. On behalf of the Aquarian Wisdom Center and Retreat, I welcome you to this webinar, Aries 2025 and the Externalization of the Hierarchy. The webinar consists in three parts, as you probably seen on the website. In the end, the last part will be the group meditation for the full moon. For those who are wondering, the recordings will be available as soon as they are ready, and we will send you the access via email. So if you want to participate, make any questions or anything, please use the chat box. Philip will keep an eye on it. And we thank you for your participation, and we welcome our host. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much, Inez, and welcome everyone to this presentation today, this gathering, this Aries full moon gathering, meditation and presentation about the externalization of the hierarchy. Just another little bit of housekeeping. We did advertise 1.5 hour sessions, but in order to juggle the time zones with the final meditation for the day, we cut them down to 1.25 hours per session. And those those times are written on our website where you registered for the webinar. So, excuse me, I have not got a very good throat, not a good look for a one-day seminar, but I will carry on regardless and just sip my lemon juice here. But in opening, I'd like to do a 10 or 15 minute meditation for group alignment. And this picture here, by the way, is the picture of Shigats, where we are told that the Master Moya, Master Kutumi, and Dwash Kul live in physical bodies. And we'll talk more about this during the presentation today. But for now, if you look at this next slide, you can see the Flower of Life mandala. And I think it's a good one to visualize when we think about the ashram of the Christ, because the ashram of the Christ over here on the right-hand side in this other diagram, where I'm circling my mouse pointer, is made up of 7 times 7 ashrams, the 7 ray ashrams and their affiliated sub-rays. 7 times 7 making 49 ashrams, which are really petals within the heart lotus of the planetary heart lotus, if you want to see it that way. So I just mentioned this before the meditation, which is going to be a very simple one that focuses and connects with this heart center, this planetary heart center we call the ashram of the Christ, which of course incorporates all the other ray ashrams within it. So without further ado, I'm just going to turn off my video and invite you to release all the activity and noise of the day thus far unfolded, taking a few long, deep breaths as we connect with the silent place within and come into awareness of the greater group process, not just here today, but all around the planet. Many groups and individuals meditating on this eve of the Aries full moon festival tomorrow. And so we sound the Om 3 times to help bring about alignment and integration individually and as a group. So, as members of the new group of world servers, all the aspirants, disciples, and initiates who are consciously working with hierarchy, we visualize this beautiful mandala, the Christ ashram, symbolized by the flower of life. Or what other image is appropriate? We send or project a line of light individually and as a group towards the center of this ashram where resides the Christ himself. And as we consciously cooperate with the annually amended planetary plan that is birthed in Aries, and we reflect upon the vast cooperative enterprise of the 49 ashrams and all their ray and sub-ray subsidiaries, of which all of us belong to in one way or another. All of them performing some part of executing the planetary plan, and recognizing and cooperating with all the other ray ashrams and disciples who carry out the planetary plan and purpose. So we also project a line of light towards Shambhala, from where that purpose emanates, the planetary crown chakra. And we become aware of the alignment between all three centers: Shambhala, hierarchy, humanity, and of course, the mediating principle between hierarchy and humanity, the new group of world servers. And so we place ourselves within this flower of life mandala, imagining the energies, feeling the energies that are there in this place of very high frequency. And we reflect on the fact that the hierarchy next year will decide a date in which to externalize in the next few decades. And what that means for all of us in terms of our service, in terms of stepping up and holding the light of planetary purpose. And again, we bear in mind our connection to all our other co-workers around the world, sending them light along the lines of relationship already established, triangles, the grid of light that surrounds the planet, that is in fact the etheric body of the planet. And so we render ourselves open to impression of what form that service will be individually for our groups as our contribution to the unfolding planetary plan as it emanates from Aries. And so we'll hold 5 minutes of silence, reflecting upon this, and that will be followed by the great invocation. And so we close the meditation by sounding the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center, where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Hey, thanks very much, everyone. We'll have a much longer meditation this evening at 1900 GMT, just to get ourselves acquainted, aligned, not only with the full moon meditation, but of course, this subject, which was the subject of one of my first books called Masters of the Seven Rays, which I've got listed here somewhere. I'll show it to you later. Here we have a few pictures of the masters or paintings by various people and various incarnations. Most of you are familiar with, so I'm not going to go through them too much detail here. This painting here of Blavatsky in front of Master R on the right, Master Moya in the middle, and the Master Kutumi. It's a little bit distorted and old, but nonetheless, it does convey something of their aura. And I've got here subtitled The Subjective Basis of the New World Religion, which is essentially a synthesis of all streams of philosophical and religious thought that will be a global spirituality, like a universal spirituality. And, excuse me, the masters have talked about their reappearance, particularly the Master Dwarf calls through Alice Bailey, through all their book, and how that 2025, next year, probably at the Wesak Festival, the Taurus full moon, they will be having their once-in-a-century conclave, or around about that time anyway, I suspect, I speculate. Sometime in 2025 at least, but Wesak is usually the time when there's a stronger alignment between Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity. and the disciples who aspire to work as hierarchy. So, excuse me, some of you may be familiar with this diagram, which is essentially a structure of the hierarchy. And the big circle here represents the hierarchy on Earth, the Son of Kamara and the other masters below. The outside of that circle is the solar hierarchy. That's why it's called solar and planetary hierarchies. And with this solar logos himself, the being we call the solar logos, that embodies this whole solar system and the various departments that exist that are reflected as above, so below into the various departments of the Manu, Christ, and Mahachohan, for instance. And we have some of the more well-known masters who are the Shohans or custodians of the rays. The Master Moya, there's M here, the Master Kutumi, the Venetian Master for the first, second, and third rays, respectively. And I have gone through this for some of you who have been to our course and the class on the hierarchy. And some of that is in this presentation today for those who didn't attend that. And with the Ageless Wisdom, it never hurts to repeat anything because it's so multi-layered in its expression. Just pause there and just check on this sound there, Inez. How's the sound going? If you're around, perhaps not. Anyway, it's the sound. Oh, someone's in the chat there. Very good. Not very good.
I'm sorry, I'm here.
I'm just checking
there
on the
are-
sound.
Yes, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not that good.
Well, sorry about this. I've got a brand new microphone, very sophisticated one, apparently.
It's not
So
always. It's not always. It might be
it's
the
just the internet, I think.
fluctuations.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to move closer to my mouth. I don't know whether it makes any difference. Matt says audio great here. So yeah, it's good for some, not so good for others. This is I guess, the way of Zoom meetings. All right, so I will proceed regardless. And I'm just going to flick through a few slides here. I want to find something. Oh, there it is. Okay, this book was one of the first ones I wrote back in 2000, Masters of the Seven Rays. I, in fact, wrote it at the same time as the Shambhala Impacts. That was my first book, printed on the fifth Shambhala Impact, in fact, in 2000. And Masters came out at the same time, but second book. So you can see I've been involved in trying to understand this subject for quite a long time. And of course, before these books were published. So anyway, coming back to the beginning now. And subjective basis of the New World religion. What is the New World religion? The breaking down of the church's grip upon the minds of the masses. Revivification of old forms infused with new life. Moving from static organizations and institutions into living organisms. What we're seeing at the end of the age of Pisces, especially with the renovating work of Pluto, is the breaking down of all these institutions and organizations, the revealing of the corruption that lays within them, and of course their ultimate demise or transformation into something else. Religious students will be given occult interpretations, and I've got Lucifer there in brackets for those of you who may have seen that link in my latest newsletter about the use of the word Lucifer in the theosophical teachings. A newer light of truth will be shed upon familiar ground, and the truth will be stepped down so that many understand. the whole hierarchy is approaching the physical plane. And this is partly why we are in the conflict we are in at the moment. Essentially, the highly refined frequencies of the Christ and the hierarchy and the legions of angelic beings who accompany them is clashing with the status quo or the lower frequency of Earth in general. So it's not just human beings who are creating the conflict. It is through these higher frequencies that are creating conflict in individuals, in groups, within nations, that is forcing them to change. But it's also bringing up the shadow of humanity, the dweller on the threshold, as we call it, within ourselves, within our nations, and the planet as a whole. We are facing the planetary dweller on the threshold. And this is right and proper if you think about it. If the hierarchy are to reappear, then the acceleration of human consciousness and the acceleration of dealing with our ancient baggage must take place before they can really do justice to us. And we do justice to them, in fact, in serving them as aspiring and hierarchy ourselves. The places within the hierarchy, the positions within the hierarchy changed fairly rapidly because of the flow of personnel, if you like, that come through, occupy a position, and then go on to some other cosmic journey, having uh, uh, fulfilled their Earth service. Although there is a special component that stay behind, choose the path of Earth service, as opposed to the other 6 cosmic paths that can be traveled, one of which those paths is called the path to Sirius, which is the one most commonly chosen by most of humanity once they've reached the stage of liberation. But I digress, as I tend to do, being a third-rate kind of type of person. Um, So the main work of the New Age, the new Aquarian cycle that we're moving into, is the raising of mass consciousness to the love principle. This is interesting because Jupiter, the ruler of the second ray of love wisdom, is the esoteric ruler of Aquarius, the sign we're going into for the next 2,000 odd years. And of course, it's the primary energy of this planet. All the rays are basically sub-rays of the second ray of love wisdom. This picture here, by the way, is one of the more accurate depictions of the Master Rakotsi, also known as the Count or Count Saint Germain. He used to be the Shohan or custodian of the 7th ray of ceremonial order or magic, but now he has been elevated to the post of the Mahashohan, which happened back in 1925. Here we have a couple of Nicholas Roerich paintings, which depict the masters in various situations and settings, in the Himalayas, in a deep crystalline cave. Roerich embarked upon a 4.5-year trip from India into the Himalayas and China back in the mid-20s, 1920s. And his extraordinary books detail that trip. And I'm sure that he and his wife Helena, the author of the Agni Yoga teachings, came in contact with the hierarchy at that time. So we are told that Moya Kutumi and Jesus, the Master Jesus, worked the most closely with the one who holds the office of the Christ. And just to bear that in mind, it is an office occupied by different beings at different times in different cycles. And so 6 masters form a nucleus around this 7th figure, the Christ. And of course, 7 is a very occult number, and that relates to the 7 chakras, the 7 rays, and the many other septenaries, the 7 planes of perception, and so forth. So the astral plane work has been intensifying as they prepare for outer activity, and the masters have to learn to work on the astral, which is not an easy thing for such evolved beings. They have left the astral plane behind eons ago in some ways, and yet they have to work there because 80% probably of humanity are still astrally polarized. Only a smaller percentage of humanity has really truly developed the mental capacity. Apparently, Moya works with the Diva Lord Agni, which is the first ray, Agni meaning fire, to inspire national executives of nations. He may have found trouble finding any decent national executives in the last decade or two, but he does anyway. That's part of his work. Kutumi works with transmuting religious dogma. He works with rose and blue divas, Lord Varuna being one of them, the angels of devotion and spiritual aspiration. These angels guard the churches, sanctuaries, and temples of the world in all religious denominations or universally spiritual areas. And Kutumi also works with church leaders as well, which would include Eastern and Western church leaders, for instance, the Dalai Lama, the Pope, that kind of thing. Jesus works with the masses of Christian people in the West, and he has a close connection with all church leaders and executives. He works as Christ's intermediary and works with the violet divas. So he may work with all these leaders and executives, but those leaders and executives probably for the main part would not perhaps know that the Master Jesus is working with them. Some of them would though for sure. Remember that the hierarchy can only influence humanity to a certain degree. They can't, karmically speaking, interfere in human affairs. They have to leave humanity to its own free will, which is must be a scary prospect for them. Any questions or comments, by the way, please put them in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that as we go along. Another picture of Master Kutumi on the left by an artist back in the 19th century who also did a portrait of Master Moya. The one on the right is by a South African artist, and you can find information about that on my website. It's one of 5 paintings that she did depicting the Master DK, who apparently said it was a reasonable likeness, quote unquote. So it's important not to get too hung up on the images of the masters in a devotional sense. The form is very illusory, and of course, when the masters return, they may have constructed completely different physical bodies by that time. In fact, the Tibetan was very old when he transmitted those teachings to Alice Bailey, and may have taken a new body by now. The Master Hilarion, the Chohan or custodian of the 5th ray of science, is in the United States. Excuse me. He stimulates the intuitive perception in true psychic research groups, parapsychology, ESP, etc. He impresses the fact of life after life or reincarnation, and was responsible for the teachings of the temple writings, which are excellent books if you want to look into those teachings of the temple. And I think it was Florence Ladue who was the amanuensis for Hilarion. Master Raj Kaul, of course, works with altruistic healers. He's a second ray Shohan, but a different sub-ray ashram than the Master Kutumi, who is his boss, so to speak. He stimulates those who work in the laboratories of the world, the philanthropic movements, the Red Cross, welfare, etc., and takes the teaching load from other masters, and also works with the healing angels. Master Jupiter, who lives in southern India, actually, apparently, in the Nilgiri Hills, in fact, works with politicians, educators, religious dreamers, and idealists, is intent upon the liberation of the masses and the concept of brother. He is on the 1st ray, too, like Master Moya. first ray shown. The English master, one of two English masters, is responsible for the Anglo-Saxon people. Another English master has capital and labor as his area. The master the Mahashohan, synthesizes all parts of the planetary plan onto the physical plane as much as possible. And of course, there are dozens of other masters we don't know anything about who work in the most obscure and hidden areas of human activity, or working with the Deva kingdom. That's why the subject of Devas and the angelic beings is so important part of the Ageless Wisdom teachings, because during the age of Aquarius, we'll be becoming far more acquainted with them, and of course the masters work very closely with them. Master Moya on your left, and a painting by an English artist, I can't remember her name now, of the Count Saint-Germain on the right there. You'll notice some esoteric little caduceus down here in the right-hand corner, and various other symbols, the bird and so forth, the geometrical shapes here. So the masters do impress behind the scenes thousands and thousands of people all around the world, whether it's a politician, whether it's inspiration to an artist or a poet or an educator. They work in those subtle realms and convey the inspiration to the various disciples and initiates who work at the coalface on the physical plane. And it is said that Christ will bring masters with him and great angels. He will re-enter the lives of humanity with more power. And so on that score, the road has to be built towards that culmination of the Christ himself appearing in a physical body. Because the externalization of the ashrams has been taking place pretty much since about the mid-19th century. But from now on, we'll accelerate because we're very close to the proposed or planned date that the hierarchy will come, and that this is all according to various cycles, astrological cycles, zodiacal cycles, planetary cycles, and so forth, ray cycles. The angels will use color and sound on the etheric of humans, animals, and flowers. Sickness will be offset. The violet angels will be especially active within four main groups of humanity. And four main rays will dominate: the first, second, fourth, and seventh. The seventh being the most potent, particularly now as we are going into a cycle of the seventh ray for the next 2,000 odd years, which I talk about in my writing. An unusual cycle of 2,500 years that started in 1945, at the end of World War II. And the seventh ray is ruled by Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius. So that ray energy will be in strong, or is picking up in strength at the moment, and will be in full strength throughout the Aquarian age, coinciding with the unfolding of that 2,000-year-odd zodiacal cycle. So the Devas will teach humanity to see etherically. They will instruct on color and healing of disease, especially violet. They will demonstrate the existence of the superconscious world, that the discarnate can be contacted. Of course, we've all been learning about this in the last century or two, in various degrees. They will train humanity in knowledge of superhuman physics so that weight will be transmuted, such as the building of the pyramids. Motion will be rapid and noiseless. Fatigue will be eliminated. Hooray! The etheric levels will be worked upon. So this transmutation of weight, the rendering weightless of stones, for instance, is an ancient technology that has been around the planet for a long time, but has been somewhat taken away from humanity due to its misuse and abuse of those formulae. The Devas will teach how to nourish the body and draw from the ethers the right food through the spleen with the solar rays. Humanity will concentrate on the etheric, and physical health will be automatic. They'll teach humanity how to expand consciousness. Can we imagine what that is going to be like in this era of having vaccines forced upon humanity that quite often do the opposite, for instance, let alone the bad nutrition and the food, the denatured food that is available to us in the supermarket and so forth. And of course, then there's the pollution in the environment, magnetic pollution, industrial pollution, noise pollution, and so forth. All these things have to transform radically in the next couple of centuries. Just lovely painting. I can't remember the artist. I did feature this some time ago in a newsletter, I think. But it speaks for itself in terms of the procession into the temple where the extraplanetary energies are invoked of the zodiac sign, the ray, and so forth. And this is pretty much us in this next couple of days over the full moon period, participating on the inner planes or the outer plane. You are involved in some group ritual. Any questions or comments so far? Please put them in the chat. So there will be three main channels for this New Age preparation: the Masonic fraternity, the church, and education, which corresponds to the first three rays. We are told that Masonry will meet the needs of those who can and should wield power. It is the home of mysteries and initiation. It deals with the ritual of deity and is a way of salvation. And it will be a training school for the advanced occultists. Now, of course, Masonry has got quite a bad image publicly, and for good reason. It has been misused and abused like many other things, like the church has, like education has. So it's important to bear in mind that there are many people of goodwill who practice Masonry, traditional Masonry, or even more esoteric Masonry, all around the planet today. And basically, the Masonic floor is a place for group ritual, invoking and anchoring the forces of hierarchy of the cosmos. In a nutshell, that is pretty much what Masonry is about. And just as the hierarchy have all their various posts and responsibilities, so that is reflected within the Masonic Lodge as well. Some of you here may have done that. I was involved in it for about 10 years myself in various lodges, so I have a few ideas about its great potential. In fact, once the shadow of Masonry has been purified and purged, and the same goes for the church. The second ray church will help devotees and the greater public and touch the masses, but it won't be necessarily the Christian church. Of course, we've seen the abuses of the Christian church in the last couple of centuries, particularly this century. So many extraordinary stories of abuse that have come forth. The third department, corresponding to the third ray, will be education, that touches the intelligent masses, those who don't respond to ceremonial ritual, and the esoteric groups, such as the ones that we're all involved with, will be in each of these different groups: Masonry, church, and education. Esoteric societies Masonic church and esoteric societies will converge as centers of initiation. The public must be familiarized with the mysteries, the law of evolution, and the hierarchy. So when the hierarchy return, the ancient mystery schools will be re-established, because they too have been around for a long time, but have been withdrawn from human human activity for several thousand years, compared to what it was like a long time ago. They have kind of been around, but not in such a big way as they were and will be in the future. So the hierarchy will be helping to re-establish the esoteric schools, the schools of initiation, the beginners schools and advanced schools, which are outlined in the book Letters on Occult Meditation by Alice Bailey. And in fact, the church itself will take people through the first and second degree initiation, which was previously the province of the Christ himself, which will be a huge load off that being's work, for sure. A typical Masonic lodge that has a lot of very esoteric symbolism and fairly typical of most Masonic lodges. The externalization of the ashrams. Yeah, I'm just looking at the time here. We have got another 25 minutes, I think. So I'm just pacing myself here. This is what this discussion is all about today. We are on the eve of one of the greatest events in human history. As most of you know, I have a esoteric history, the hidden history of humanity. And so the hierarchy is planning to reappear for the first time since the first flooding of Atlantis almost 4 million years ago. There were 4 major floodings of Atlantis that come down to us. The last one, the fourth and final one, was about 13,000 years ago. So the hierarchy has stood as a wall between humanity and cosmic evil since then. Humanity has been under control by the materialistic forces for a very, very, very long time. And that's another reason why there's so much conflict today, because they know what the planetary plan is. And they're fighting tooth and nail through their various groups and individuals on the planet to prevent the reappearance of the Christ and of the hierarchy amongst humanity again. But what's going on right now is that the hierarchy are sifting and weighing humanity in the scale, and all the disciples and initiates and aspirants who are on the path are being forced or asked to step up to really, get a move on, so to speak, and perhaps some have failed and some have succeeded in those endeavors. But nevertheless, they are watching and waiting. They are not unaware of what's going on in the world in terms of the horrors that continue day by day, various wars and conflicts and just basically humanity's inhumanity to itself. So the hierarchy works constantly in awakening consciousness in all forms. It directs world events as far as humanity will permit, of course, allowing for free will. It seeks to impress itself on those who are receptive. A few times in the blue books, the Alice Bailey books, the Tibetan mentions how some disciples are unreachable because of their minds being too active or being self-absorbed in their emotional bodies, so forth. So they're always looking for people who are intuitive, who work intuitively, who are not polarized in the concrete mind so much, but who are intuitive and receptive. And they direct and control the unfolding cyclic cultures of civilization, particularly the Manu. And that post of the Manu will be taken by Moya in the not too distant future, whereas the Master Kutumi will take the role of the Christ. They've worked together for eons and will continue to do so throughout the Aquarian age and beyond. And as we go from the 5th root race to the 6th root race. So the hierarchy transmits energies from Shambhala. It receives the fire of God, which breaks down all old forms and prepares humanity for initiation. Initiation is simply a speeding up process for humanity. As I've mentioned many times in newsletters and so forth, in esoteric history, humanity has fallen behind in its evolution due to the failure of the moon chain, dramatic music, and the catching up process that we're engaged in. So initiation is basically applying a higher consciousness from one's own self-initiated effort in one lifetime or another that leads to the conferring of initiation in another life and the consequent expansion of consciousness. The hierarchy prepares humanity to receive them into the master's ashrams according to the soul ray of the individual concerned. You might be a second ray soul, which is the most common, but of course there's fourth ray souls which aren't in incarnation right now. There are third ray souls, there are seventh ray souls, there are first ray souls, and so forth. And hierarchy will inaugurate new presentations of ancient teachings for initiation through the new school. We can look at some of these ashramic relationships through various diagrams. This is one particular author. This big circle here, the 5-pointed star inside it, inside a circle, inside a square, inside an outer circle. And the central ashram here is the 2/1 ashram. The second ray ashram with the first ray sub-ray. And likewise, all the other ashrams are speculated to be around these various shapes in their ray and sub-ray groupings. So we can imagine this is the ashram of the Christ, essentially, of all the various ray ashrams and their relationship to one another, all carrying out part of the planetary plan according to their ray qualities and their skills associated with that. For instance, the first ray ashram and the realm of politics. Now, I'm just looking for where's the first ray ashram? It's disappeared. These are all second ray and seventh ray. No, mostly all the rays except for the first ray. Let's see. Anyway, just to not dwell on that for too long, but there are various ways and means of looking at it as per another diagram. Down here, for instance, the so-called lambdoma, constructed by an Italian group that looks at all the ray ashrams and their sub-rays and their various service activities. So, a nice little interlude here. This painting. Before hierarchy can emerge, the 49 ashrams have to align, and this is brought about by the second and first ray energy, the 2-1 ashram, which was at the center of that previous diagram. The hierarchical alignment will establish a fluid interplay between the three planetary centers, Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity. In 2025, at its General Assembly, the hierarchy will decide upon a date for externalization, and we are now in the stage of the forerunner, particularly 2024 forerunner. The hierarchy are establishing closer telepathic rapport with disciples on all rays. So you can imagine that they're pretty busy because there's only about 63 masters altogether who are overseeing human evolution of about 8 billion people. So obviously a tiny fraction of that 8 billion people are the ones that they mainly work with in terms of guiding humanity. They have to learn to work upon the astral plane because it does not exist for them, as mentioned before. The hierarchy's readjustment to humanity in the ashrams will set up as magnetic centers through which their directed activity will reach humanity. There is a master already in each of the 5 major planetary centers that we direct energy through in the Great Invocation full moon meditations. London, Geneva, New York City, Darjeeling, Tokyo. They could be your next door neighbor for you know. Of course, they keep themselves well hidden, and due to the fact that they have complete control over the physical realm, can appear or disappear at will, especially if they've appropriated a Maya Varupa, which we'll talk about later. The adjustment is between hierarchical groups and groups of men and women on Earth. When this is completed, the hierarchy will externalize. So you can imagine that there's a lot of planning. In one of my newsletters in the last year or two, I speculated that the hierarchy's latest appearance could be as late as 2080. This is about 30 years before the sun actually precesses astronomically into Aquarius. And 2080 is also an important Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, as I recall. But so that's the latest. But of course, a lot of people are hoping it's going to be sooner rather than later. But again, we can't expect them to come to our rescue. We have to step up, stand up, and take on the responsibility of the planetary transformation that's coming about. The hierarchy has many difficulties and adjustments to surmount, new energies pouring to the planet, fresh tensions because of new alignments, human enlightenments and reactions in the face of darkness, increased personnel, disturbing the rhythm of the hierarchy, and also the growth and training of members of the hierarchy. We have another Nicholas Roerich painting here, the Mother of the World holding the banner of peace, which he promoted strongly in the 1930s as a kind of counterbalance to the rise of fascism. Any comments or questions so far? Please put them in the chat. So you can see an ashram as a circle of concentric rings. And at the center of this ashram is the Master KH. The center of this ashram is the Master DK. DK only became a master in 1882, was it, or 1885? Can't remember the exact date. And he has been a devotee of the Master Kutumi for many centuries. They've worked together. And so their ashrams overlap. These concentric rings overlap. The middle place, concentric circles are magnetic ring pass knots through which all disciples will pass as they head towards the master at the center of the ashram, through the processes of proven service and initiation over many lifetimes. So each circle is a magnetic ring pass knot. You can only get to that certain stage of a circle depending on what initiation you've taken. But you will gravitate to the center of that circle according to the master of that particular ray which your soul is upon. Okay. And as you penetrate to the inner circle, so to speak, therein you become apprised more and more of what the planetary plan is and what you or your group how you or your group can serve that portion of the planetary plan according to the ashramic ray. And so this is just an example of 2 ashrams, but they really all interpenetrate and interact with each other. you could draw many different mandalas of relationship between the ray ashrams that are functioning. So when we concentrate on that great mandala of the flower of life, and imagine all of the 49 ashrams within that flower, and their cooperation with one another through those lines of force, there are particular relations between all the rays, and therefore particular relations between all the ray ashrams, which of course is you could write a whole book about that. So again, we see these interpenetrating circles in the ripples in a pond, for instance, or in cymatics, and of course even in crop circles. There we have a similar type of flower of what it resembles a flower of life. It's not technically a flower of life. Again, this is by our Italian friends. And the fourth ray is in the center, the ray of humanity, in fact, whilst the other rays are around the 6 points of this hexagram, the six-pointed star. And there's greater detail in all the circles inside there too, of course. So all good ways to visualize the hierarchy. I know in one meditation that we do, excuse me, that I visualized a small village that is actually the hierarchy, and the various masters and disciples of that ashram are living in the different houses within the village. And there are streets and alleyways and so forth. And there's a wonderful central fountain that is like an oasis to revive and to tap into the waters of life, literally. So there are many different visualizations which we can come to us personally. Another Rurik painting of the Himalayas. Apparently he painted about 7,000 paintings. There's a face up here, another face down here, I think. Of course, the full moon. So we have a painting here on the left from back in the Renaissance era, and the plans for several centuries ahead have been brought forward because of the unexpected preparedness of humanity. Since 1425, which was the time of the Italian Renaissance, the hierarchy has been aware of the need for externalization. That would have been one of their centennial conclaves, by the way, the 100-year cycles. Being aware of the need for externalization, and this came as a major disturbance to the rhythm of thousands of years. That was also the start of a third ray cycle in 1425, by the way. Hence the brilliance of the Renaissance and the painters, the sculptures, the inventions, the whole culture of Europe changed. So the hierarchy have internally prepared, for example, learned how to use physical senses and work telepathically most of the time. They've achieved a wide culture and understanding of civilization. So we are 600 years fast forwarded from 1425 now. And now is where, as they say colloquially, where the rubber hits the road with regard to their actual externalization. The masters do not trouble themselves to attain proficiency in all subjects. They pick the ashram's brain, so to speak. Adepts of the fourth degree have retained their worldly specialized knowledge, we are told. Initiates of the third degree and under the master's supervision will lead the externalization of the third degree and under. Later, certain masters will appear and take outer and recognizable physical control of world affairs. So we have Dag Hammarskjöld, who was the head of the UN and was killed or murdered in a plane crash in 1962. And of course, JFK, another great world disciple who was assassinated in 1963. So it has been argued that the forces of materialism since around the early 60s have taken a strong grip, and that is who we are dealing with now in the mid 2020s with the planetary dweller being exposed and humanity recognizing it and recognizing that they can band together in groups and stand up to the imposition of the totalitarian regimes and so forth. Members of hierarchy will work as members of the human family, but not as a proclaimed hierarchy before the externalization proper. So it'll be by stealth, so to speak. There will be politicians, businessmen, religious teachers, scientists, philosophers. The world disciples' task is with laying the foundation, and it is difficult. They have to teach truths which are destructive, that is, break down people's thought form. They must cultivate impersonality and the recognition of faults and virtues, and this will enrage even friends thought to be impartial. And we've seen a lot of this in the last few years, I think. They will demonstrate a failure to be impressed with old rituals and ceremonies to ancient and obsolete ideas. They will bring constant warfare to conditioning glamours. Disciples will meet with little encouragement, like that advertisement to accompany a Munson to the South Pole. No pay, bitter conditions, likelihood of death. So, and of course, we have a lovely picture here of Kuan Yin by Nicholas Roerich as well. So these isolated initiates and disciples scattered all over the world are doing the important task of destruction, plus the enunciation of principles. This is the key factor. The disciples and initiates are the real builders of the new world. They will assume leadership, high office in all departments of life. They will be put together there by people who recognize their talents. Their immediate work when coming into a power and recognition will be a presentation of those ideas, which will lead to a fusion of ideas which govern democracy. And they will implement the new religion. Picture here of Aldous Huxley, of course, who wrote Brave New World, and much of what he wrote is coming to pass now. And he passed. I was just looking the other day. He actually passed on the same day as JFK, 22nd of the 11th, 63. And of course, we have Archbishop Desmond Tutu here, South African campaigner, warrior for peace. Libran, as I recall. I think Huxley was a Gemini. Master Jesus will assume control of the church. The Buddha will send 2 trained disciples to reform Buddhism. The Christ will restore the ancient spiritual landmarks and eliminate the non-essential, reorganizing the entire religious field. Spiritually minded financiers will take hold of the world economic situation and bring about great changes. One might ask, when? When are you get a move on? The Christ and Masters make public appearance and will make public appearance and work in the world. They will restore the mystery teachings, which will cover all phases of human unfoldment. The story of humanity will be pictorialized. I've attempted to do this with my documentary on the hidden history of humanity and the series of books and other documentaries I have planned for that. And in fact, this is the opening still from that documentary, The Hidden History of Humanity, 2 hours and 37 minutes. If you haven't seen it yet, please have a look at it. You may want to break it up over a few nights. There's a lot to absorb in it, but it goes with my companion book, Unveiling Genesis, Mysteries of the Root Races and Cycles.
I'm sorry, it seems that Philip got kicked out, so just hang on for a few seconds. I'm sure you will hop in as soon as he can. Just wait with me. Thank you. Okay, so it seems that he was frozen, so he's rebooting his computer to get in again. I'm sorry about this. These things happen. Let's just take a break, and I'm sure you'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so this is taking a bit longer than we expected. We are making the break now, and we'll be back at 3 o'clock. Hopefully by then, Philip's problem will be sorted out. So
I'm
if you
back
want,
actually.
oh, here it is.
I'm
Okay.
very sorry about that. How many minutes did we miss there?
I don't know, but it was a while. Maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes, seven.
Can
I'm
anyone
not
else give us
sure.
some feedback of where I was up to when the basically everything froze on my screen and I had to reboot. I don't know what happened there. Zoom has got a reputation for doing that at times. So can anyone say where we were up to before? Eric is saying
It was
exact.
5 minutes, Philip. 14:45. Eric is saying.
Oh, so we were pretty much. Let me go to the share screen here. Just a minute. and I'll reshare my screen, and perhaps someone can tell me what slide did everyone see this slide and hear what I said about it?
Yes, I think so. I did.
Okay. And yeah, and this one?
Uh, this one, yes, yes, this one, yes.
Eric's saying yes. Okay, thank
Yes,
you, Eric.
yes.
And this one?
Yeah, we are on the hidden history of humanity. I even
Right.
leave
So
the link.
this was where I paused.
Yes.
Okay, that's very weird because my mouse just froze. I had to completely reboot the whole computer and log back in. Anyway, thank God we're back in. So let's reconvene, say in about 10 minutes time. Will that be okay?
Yes, I think
Someone's
so.
saying you were on one with just writing about the masters. I'm not sure what you mean there, Michael.
Well, I'm sure it was on the hidden history
Okay.
of humanity because I left the link.
Okay. Yes. All right, then
Yes.
that's great because I was going to stay for the next session. I was going to resume on this page here. So we didn't miss too much, which is great. I'm very sorry about that, everyone. I've got no idea how that happened. All right. Thanks, Hugh. Thank you, everyone else, for your feedback there, Eric and Michael. All right. So let's reconvene at 5 past the hour. So that's about another 12 minutes or something like that. Is that okay?
Okay.
Very good. And I'll leave the screen open then as where it is right now. And you can stop the recording if you like.
Okay, I will stop the recording and then start again. Yes.
Very good. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. And I'll mute my sound. So just a sound check there, Inez, to make sure we're back on track, okay?
Yes, I already started the recording, so you can
And
start.
what screen can you see right now?
Secondary ashram from the
Okay,
beginning. Yes.
very good. All right. Well, thank God that little drama we didn't lose too much information. Sounds like the gremlins got in the works there, as they do sometimes. All right, so the second ray ashram will break down old theologies, present a new vision of the new world religion, or the new universal spirituality. I prefer to use that phrase. The first ray ashram will cultivate right human relations, creating a new intuitional consciousness, consequently a changing political consciousness, and bringing nations together. Wow, that is so sorely needed right now, is it not? We're seeing the crumbling institutions of political parties all around the world with, in fact, no left or right existing anymore. There is no left or right. The left have become the right have become the left. There is a complete mishmash and breaking down of all political parties. And of course, if anything new is to evolve and emerge, then of course these old institutions have to break down, and we are right in the middle of that. Particularly, of course, in the USA. And the first ray ashram will emphasize the freedom of the individual, the four essential freedoms, right international interplay, the abolition of war, clean political regimes, free from graft and selfish ambition. Of course, that is just rife throughout the world now in all political systems. No one is clean and free from that whatsoever. Of course, those four essential freedoms from FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that he enunciated, DK referred to him as that great first ray disciple. So he was definitely part of that first ray ashram. Fifth ray ashram will show humanity the benefits of the atomic age, fusion, not fission, will show the reality of energy, ether technology, Tesla technology, of course. Science will help abolish labor, giving time to think, to establish new cultural interests, free to unfold the abstract mind. So basically what we've seen in the last 50 years is an incredible accelerated evolution of science. And this is partly due to the fifth ray still being in incarnation right up until about 1999, I believe. But we've also seen the shadow of the fifth ray and the shadow of science and the misuse and abuse of science used by people to control humanity and to manipulate humanity. So that is science and religion has reached a point. Of course, the Tibetan mentions how even back in the 20th century, how most religions no longer serve their purpose. Islam, Judaism, Christianity. Although I will say that I think that for the masses, religion is still not a bad thing in terms of keeping certain principles in mind to live by, of course, and because the other option to that is basically chaos and anarchy. I'm talking about the unawakened masses here. Third ray ashram will deal with the worldwide financial adjustment, the sharing principle, barter and exchange. National currencies will be suspended. Material assets will be under an entirely new system. There will be an international group to control planetary resources. Hooray! Because what we're seeing now, of course, is the theft of land, the plundering of resources of developing nations by greedy colonialist sort of policy nations, which are waking up to the fact that of their past couple of centuries of misdeeds, which is encouraging people, countries like France, Britain, and so forth. And this is promising in terms of this growing awareness of their past and the misuse and abuse of other nations and other peoples. They'll build a new structure of material relationships, which is most difficult owing to the evil pull of human selfishness. The seventh and sixth ray ashrams will come later. Of course, in this outgoing sixth ray cycles, many sixth ray souls will be going out of incarnation and will come back in on another sixth ray cycle somewhere further down the track. Many seventh ray souls will be coming into incarnation conversely at this time, and have been, in fact, a ray of organization. Fourth ray ashram, will be the last to externalize, although there was an overall fourth ray influence because the fourth ray rules humanity as a whole. Here we have a painting by William Blake that some of you are familiar with. The muses dancing, I think, hand-like figures. Very beautiful. Just as a visual interlude there for you. The work for reaching humanity falls into two groups: the disciples and aspirants in the field of occultism, and disciples and initiates from the three ashrams, 1, 2, and 5, I speculate here, will act as a vanguard of hierarchy and proceed it into outer manifestation starting in 1975. Well, this is interesting, isn't it? So, point 1, he says that disciples and aspirants in the field of occultism, we have disciples and aspirants in many other fields of human activity, which vastly outnumber the very relatively small field of occultism or esotericism. But of course, occultism deals with causes in the subjective realm, and therefore the building of those subjective forms is paramount to the externalization of the hierarchy. And of course, the hierarchy have been gradually building these external forms for the last couple of centuries. I'm just going to flick forward here to somewhere. Where was I? Yeah, I want to get to this page here. Examples of people who are disciples and initiates of the ashram. So we'll get to it later. Got plenty of time to go through and to chew the cud, as they say, on this subject. Again, any questions or comments, please place them in the chat. The question that you're thinking of asking might be the question that someone else is wanting to ask or clarify. So information on hierarchy should take these lines. The emphasis on evolution of humanity, its goal and perfection, not the idealistic perfection of the visionary mystic necessarily. The emphasis on evolution of humanity. And our history, of course, which of course is absolutely suppressed. Majority of humanity still thinks that the human civilization came about 6,000 years ago. And of course, this is the type of thinking that I'm trying to counteract in my hidden history of humanity, re-establishing the right timelines according to the hierarchy and, of course, the ancient cycles in the Vedas. So the emphasis on evolution of humanity, knowing where we've come from, where we've evolved through all the root races and sub races and so forth, what we've been developing along the way, and where we're going in terms of the redemption of this planet, this non-sacred planet we call Earth, one of the 5 non-sacred planets in the solar system, and the 7 sacred planets, of course, that work with those 5 non-sacred planets. And it's the human kingdom who will bring about the perfection of this planet and the creation of the transformation into a sacred planet through, of course, their own perfection and liberation. Each human being that is liberated will be another cell in the body of the planetary logos that will add to that being's liberation or initiation. So information in the hierarchy should take the line of the control of personality by the soul, teach the constitution of man, the subtle bodies, etc. And of course, meditation, the regular meditation that brings about an awareness of what is not integrated within the personality, that seeks to align the personality with the higher self or soul through visualization techniques and right meditation. We've been given plenty of information about that in the Blue Books by Alice Bailey, and of course, many thousands of other sources. Teach on the relation of the individual soul to all souls. The kingdom of God is simply soul-controlled humanity. From a recognition of the above, the fact of hierarchy can be deduced as something natural and normal. It has always existed, but remained unrecognized owing to a few people living as actual soul. The hierarchy near Shambhala was established 17.5 million years ago, we are told. And I talk about this in my book, Shambhala Impacts. This was just after the Lemurian root race had been established and the beginnings of the Atlantean root race. And it was established to bring in the souls who are ready for initiation and start bringing them through the temples of initiation. Okay, can you see my picture, Inez? I've kind of lost it somewhere. Well, there it is down there, I think. Yeah, okay, it's all right. Not that I want to look at myself, just trying to manage this floating bar on my screen here that gets in the way. So, all right. Fact of hierarchy can be deduced. Another Rurik painting. The 4 wise men, perhaps. Oh, it was three, wasn't it? Maybe they've got someone tagging along with them. They will be taught the idea of bodily existence or presence of the masters, the Christ as head of hierarchy and the director of the kingdom of God. The emphasis on the unfolding plan through the study of evolution, historical process, comparative analysis of ancient modern civilization and cultures. This is particularly my forte that I'm deeply interested in through my books and videos and so forth. Because if we don't know our history, then we have no idea where we are and of where we're going. And of course, we are condemned to repeat the mistakes of the past, as the Spanish philosopher Santayana said. In the book Externalization of the Hierarchy by Alice Bailey, she says, or the Tibetan says, the thread of purpose will be noted and followed through century after century, integrating not only history into one complete story of the revelation of divine qualities through the medium of humanity, but integrating with it and into all world philosophies, the central theme of all creative art, the symbolism of architecture, and the conclusions of science. And of course, the ancient ruins that we see, the pyramids in Egypt, the ruins in Peru, and so forth, attest to this great intelligence that directed those civilizations. In the chat here, Heidi says, when will the Temple of Ibez in Brazil be occupied again by hierarchy? Well, I don't think they ever unoccupied it. It's just been dormant. And we are told in the sixth root race, where Brazil will be the leading nation, or what the country we now know as Brazil, but it'll be much bigger by then, in about 25,000 years' time, the sixth root race will begin, and therefore the Temple of Ibez, which was the main temple of initiation back in Lemuria, was the first Shambhala outpost, of course, as you know, will come full circle, and Shambhala will be, the main Shambhala outpost will be in South America. And I do have there's a video on my website, on my YouTube channel, where you can, where I talk about this, the three Shambhalas. And the fact that in Ibez was the first one in South America, in the proximity of the new humanity. But of course, the Lemurians were spread all over the world, but part of South America was part of Lemuria. The second Shambhala, of course, was in Central America, near the Mayan institutions. And the third Shambhala, of course, is the current one in the Gobi Desert, which kind of superintends the fifth root race and the first sub-race of the fifth root race, which was India. Anyway, so I think they're always active. They're just, some are more dormant than others at different cycles. There are various spiritual groups in South America who claim to be in touch with Ibez too. So take that as you will. The approach to human evolution will offset all the old theosophical and Rosicrucian presentations. Interesting, huh? That's theosophical, as in Blavatsky, Bailey, and so forth. Christ will be portrayed as a strong and able executive, not a sweet, sentimental sufferer. He'll be an inspirer of all faiths who has no use of fanaticism, which of course is one of the major signatures of the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, which is the strongest ray that influenced the entire age of Pisces and was responsible, for instance, for the Inquisition in Europe in Italy and Spain and all the other European countries. Some of those countries like Spain and Italy have the 6th ray in their makeup. So we have the Rosicrucian cross on the left, very beautiful rosy cross as it's called. Very esoteric. There have been books written about that unpack the entire symbolism of that cross. You'll notice that there's a 7-pointed star at the center. And of course, on the right, we have the theosophical symbol of the 6-pointed interlaced hexagram with the symbol, the Ankh in the middle, which is the symbol of Venus as well. The swastika above it, and the Om symbol above that. And of course, the radiating rays of the sun. There is no religion higher than truth. And of course, the Ouroboros, as it's called, the snake that's swallowing its tail, a symbol of infinity in some ways. Now, another beautiful picture by Rurik called the Chalice of the Christ, who is said to reside somewhere in Central Asia. The other masters reside not too far from, around Shagat, which is north of Darjeeling, over the mountains in Asia. But Central Asia is more like all the Stan countries, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and all those places. I suspect that the Christ is based up around there somewhere in a physical body, or perhaps building preparation for his return. As I say later, the masters will use different techniques of reincarnating. When the United Nations has emerged, when the welfare of the world, then the welfare of the world will be assured. Well, we've seen an incredible corruption and compromisation of the United Nations, have we not, in the last few decades in particular? It is a young, evolving entity, as I've often pointed out, and therefore subject to manipulation by other institutions such as the WEF and so forth. But really, the hope of the world is in the United Nations eventually, when it matures. So that may be in the next century, or hopefully in the next few decades, sooner rather than later, because the United Nations has proved itself to be impotent and stymied and compromised by many different forces. Welfare, we are told, is love in action. Right relations is love among humanity, groups, and nations. International cooperation is love on a world scale. So currently, of course, United Nations and other powerful nations like the USA are basically impotent at controlling what's going on in Israel, in Gaza. This is a sign of where we're at, but at the same time, we're very close to flipping that into something else entirely different. Christ's return presents no alluring picture to him. It will be painful to come from his mountain retreat into humanity. His major pains have been his own disciples. Of course, the famous saying from John, "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, the cock shall not crow till thou hast denied me thrice." This was in the Garden of Gethsemane, of course, when his 3 disciples went to sleep. And he felt somewhat abandoned, to say the least. This is the pain of the Christ. And of course, this was the Christ who was occupying Jesus' body for the last 3 years of the disciple Jesus' ministry. Okay, so Jesus consciously vacated his body to allow the Christ, the one who holds the office of the Christ, to use that body. Both of them took initiations at that time. The crucifixion, the 4th degree initiation by Jesus, and the Christ taking the 6th and 7th initiations, we're told, which is almost beyond is way beyond our ken, our understanding. Christ must prove the scope of his mission in world affairs before going to higher evolutions. He must reach the intellects of humanity as well as their hearts because of the development of the mind of humanity in the past 2,000 years. And this is a really important point because I talk about the 5.5.5, the fifth branch race of the fifth subrace of the fifth root race, the 5 being the number of mind, the number of the fifth ray, and representing manas or mind, and how the 555 has reached a point of relative evolution of the mental capacity for humanity. Even if it's only 20% of humanity, it's still a substantial amount that has a lot of power just even within that minority that reflects the development of mind of humanity in the last 2,000 years. The major task for the Christ will be the establishing of right human relations in every department of living. The Christ has set his face towards Jerusalem, so to speak, Jerusalem standing four square, quote unquote. On the left, we have Orthodox Christian depiction of the Christ. And I think this is the Garden of Gethsemane, actually, another depiction of the Garden of Gethsemane, the 3 disciples down here who are, I think they're sleeping or they're sliding down the slope. I'm not sure. But anyway, we have a couple of angels up here, either side of the Christ. How can I personally meet this challenge? What can I specifically do? What are the steps that I and every other aspirant should take? The sealing of the door where evil dwells, as we discuss or sound in the Great Invocation, is the establishing of right human relationships. There is an inertia of the average spiritually minded who eventually rationalize successfully that they're doing the best that they can do under the circumstances. And sometimes there is the difference between the aspirant and the disciple in terms of one's pledged service work. Of course, the sealing of the door where evil dwells is all the lower centers, but the solar plexus in particular, which is the grand central station of the lower centers, where the energy is raised up from there into the heart center. We have something in the chat here. Michael says transfiguration. This is the 4th degree initiation. Yes, the transfiguration. You might have mentioned that a few minutes ago. All right. The icon. Oh, okay. Thank you. The icon in the picture back here is called the transfiguration. In fact, the picture, the Rurik picture on my book, The Masters of the Seven Rays, down here, is the transfiguration as well. Well, it's Jesus. It's called Jesus on the mountaintop, or the Christ on the mountaintop, but it's essentially the temptations where the devil, depicted down here, is takes him up to the mountaintop and says, "I will give you all this," and Jesus renounces that. Of course, the transfiguration is actually the 3rd degree in many ways. The renunciation is the 4th degree. And the 3rd degree is regarded by the masters as the first real initiation, even though the 2nd degree is so hard to take in many ways. They regard the 3rd degree as you're in, you're in hierarchy now. But even so, between the 3rd and 4th degrees, there can be many challenges of recapitulating the previous stages of evolution for the 1st and 2nd degree initiation testings. Very interesting. All right, sorry, let's go back here for a moment. And the inertia of the average spiritually minded person who eventually rationalizes successfully that they're doing the best they can under the circumstances. I think Alice Bailey was a great example of a third degree initiate. I think she took the third degree in that lifetime, at least. And the sacrifices that she made in the last few years of her life when she was sick and working from her office in bed, and getting blood transfusions, regular blood transfusions every month. Quite extraordinary. If you read her biography, the unfinished autobiography, it's a very inspiring read. Here we have a painting on the left by Khalil Gibran. You'll notice that these two souls are tethered together at the wrist here. I can't remember what it's called, that one. Someone might have to tell me in the chat. So DK is continuing in terms of his talking about the average spiritually minded person. The truth is that only 1 or 2 hours per day is needed to do the work. That's meditation, that's working with your group, brothers and sisters. Oh, it's called Joy, this painting. Yes, by Gibran. Circumstances or environment are no excuse or obstacle to the spiritual life. People hide behind the alibi of poor health, imagined ills. The only solution for creeping inertia is to ignore the body and take the joy in the livingness of service. Well, there's a first-rate kind of admonition, I would say, to ignore the body. Given our current preoccupation with the body, of course, and fitness and so forth, and that's all good. But there are some things that, some inertias, some physical disabilities that people are saddled with for the rest of their lives, and must use the will to go beyond in terms of their service. And this, of course, helps to open the sacrifice petals of the heart lotus, the last tier of petals to be opened, getting on into the later stages of evolution. And so he says it leads to a longer life. Needless self-care and preoccupation can be spent serving hierarchy. Of course, this is a fairly austere kind of directive, you could say. It's something straight out of the Zen monastery where you get whacked across the back with the bamboo stick if you're not sitting right. It's something similar to that. Another alibi is fear. Just a minute, something. Oh, just a moment, I've got to turn something off. Just a second. How's the sound again? I've just plugged back in. How are we going for sound?
It's good.
Very good. I left the coffee pot on the stove. I thought the smell of coffee was very strong. So, all right. We all good?
Yes.
Good. I'm going to open the window here. So he says it leads to a longer life, needless self-care, preoccupation, etc. Another alibi is fear, which leads to inertia and inaction, of course. We must demonstrate activity and not hide behind alibis. Of course, the main glamour of humanity, which is on the second ray glamour, is the glamour of self-pity. I have to reposition this microphone in my ear. Okay, sounds still okay?
Yes, still
Very
okay.
good. Okay. Aspirants and disciples have a fear of intruding, of being rebuffed, or being seen to be peculiar. You know, the typical criticism is that, oh, my sister's into all that new age rubbish or is a conspiracy theorist. Hence, this keeps people silent, never discovering how ready people are for the discussion of Christ's return. It's a kind of spiritual cowardice in a sense. Or that thinking that saying the word Christ is not hip or fashionable to say because it's associated with traditional Christianity. Of course, we can use the word or phrase the world teacher or Lord Maitreya as well, which is the same thing. This causes millions of hours of lost service. It would lighten the load of those with no alibis. Inertia is not simply psychological, matter is involved, you know, the inertia of the body. And the second ray people who are strong, who might have a second ray physical body, which is quite possible, do find it very difficult for this thing we call tamas in the Hindu tradition, or inertia. Is the slowest aspect of substance, tamas. Tamas can be transmuted into rajas, which is activity, which leads to sattva, which is rhythm. So there is a correspondence with the moon, tamas, the sun, activity, and the ascendant in the horoscope, sattva. And certain signs like Taurus, for instance, certainly represent the tamasic quality of inertia, some of the fixed signs. There are millions of people who can rechannel money as well. Prerequisites are: one, courage and a much needed quality to put aside shyness about money issues. Two, workers to make those sacrifices and arrangements which enable them to give to the limit of their capacity. The difficulty is not organizing money, but it's getting people to give. Three, the metaphysical schools and esoteric groups, many who are closest to the heart of the spiritual teachings, cannot ground on the physical plane the need for money. Therefore, the third prerequisite is the service of the one humanity. The more mystical groups can raise money much easier than the more deeply occult groups, we're told. And that is true. Four, a careful presentation of the cause for financial support. Of course, this is related to our group, the Aquarian Wisdom Center retreat, and its stated vision that you can find on our website of creating a property where a retreat can be located for teaching, meditation, and sustainability. And five, a vital and sure belief in humanity as a whole, no pessimism about the future or distress over the dying past. This is a big one too, because we are really challenged at the moment to see a kind of a very daunting control of humanity by the materialistic forces. And yet there are so many amazing things emerging that are counteracting that. And we have to really hold that vision before us. So this might be a good place to leave this session. Now, hang on. We're going for an hour and a quarter, aren't we? No, excellent. We'll keep going then, because I wanted to follow through with this next section. And that's what I've been discussing in my recent newsletter, the imminent externalization of the hierarchy. And seeing 2024 as a forerunner for 2025. And particularly Aries, of course. The Aries full moon festival right now. Aries Libra, of course, the moon in Libra, sun in Aries. Very close to the equinox, just by a few days. So the whole week has been a very potent window for us to take advantage of and to practically apply what we've been given in the ageless wisdom. There are groups, for instance, who are doing a global glamour meditations based upon the meditation given by the Tibetan in the book called Glamour, a World Problem. So they're doing a lot of subjective work on a regular level, trying to dissipate some of the major planetary glamours, like the glamour of authority, the glamour of separation, the glamour of manipulation. These are the three major glamours that have control of humanity at the moment. So just to mention that, now I was talking about Neptune is going is in Pisces at the moment, of course. Neptune, one of the rulers of the sixth ray, of the outgoing sixth ray. Pisces, of course, being the outgoing 2,000 odd year cycle we're leaving. But Neptune goes into Aries very soon. And will stay there until 2039. Hence, this period may provide a window of opportunity, but not necessarily, depending upon world circumstances, that date might be decades later. But one fact is certain, the hierarchy have already put the wheels in motion for their preparation to externalize. And the diagram below is a reminder, or to the side to your left there is a reminder of the structure of hierarchy in relation to this planet and the solar system as a whole. So down here we have the initiates, disciples, and probationers, as they're called. You probably can't read that, but it's where my mouse is circling, right at the bottom of that circle. We have the 7 ray ashrams, the 4 subsidiary ashrams, and the 3 major ashrams of the 7 rays here. DK is down here, of course, just under KH. And the Christ, of course, is at the head of that column, and Sanakamara up here. But we are the probationers, disciples, and initiates at our various stages of unfoldment. And humanity is down here, is off the edge of the wheel, if you like. And of course, this group here that I'm circling embodies the esoteric portion of the new group of world servants, or even the exoteric portion too. We've got more people working at the coalface in the outer world who are initiates, disciples, and probationers than the esotericists of the world. So the hierarchy have put the wheels in motion for their preparation to externalize. Externalization means that many in the hierarchy will take physical bodies, including the Christ. And this is a very important quote here, because a lot of us talk about the return of the Christ within the heart, and that's true, of course. To recognize that many people who are waking up at the moment are taking the first initiation and experiencing that birth of the Christ consciousness, or the awareness of that Christ consciousness for the first time. So the Tibetan says the invocative cry of humanity is ascending hourly to the secret place of the Most High, and the hierarchy plans to emerge when Christ appears and restores the rule of the Spirit on earth. The hour for the restoration of the ancient mysteries has arrived. It will then be possible for the hierarchy, the Church of Christ, hitherto invisible, to externalize itself and to function openly upon the physical plane. This will indicate a return to the situation which existed in Atlantean days when, to use a biblical symbology, Genesis chapters 2 and 3, God himself walked among men. He talked with them, and there was no barrier between the kingdom of men and the kingdom of God. Divinity was then present in physical form, and the members of the spiritual hierarchy were openly guiding and directing the affairs of humanity as far as man's innate freedom permitted. Now, in the immediate future, and on a higher turn of the spiral of life, this will again happen. The masters will walk openly among humanity. The Christ will reappear in physical presence, in a physical body. So as the Tibetan mentioned before, the prospect of doing that may even make some of the masters apprehensive. It's not an easy ask, so to speak. Somewhat like jumping into a crowded cattle pen full of dust and baying animals is the analogy that I can think of. So in 2025, at the once-in-a-century Shambhala conclave, both Neptune and Saturn will have begun their journey into Aries, making various conjunctions all the way through to 2026. Neptune, of course, is said to be one of the names of the Christ. As DK says, in certain ancient formulas, the great teacher of the West and the present world initiator, Christ, is spoken of as Neptune, who rules the ocean, whose trident and astrological symbol signifies the Trinity and manifestation, and who is the ruler of the Piscean age, the avatar of the Piscean age. Yet that same being who holds the office of the Christ will also be the avatar for the Aquarian age, which is an unusual situation, and it relates to the karma of what occurred in Palestine 2,000 years ago. And it's interesting, is it not, what is occurring in Palestine right now? And the fact that the Master Jesus is said to live in Syria, next door to all that. The Master Hilarion, not far away in Crete, although all the masters travel frequently, we are told, and the Master Serapis in Egypt. Hence, Neptune and Aries carries a double signature of the Christ theme, because Aries is the lamb, of course, who becomes the ram of Aries eventually. And this lamb is a symbol of innocence. And so for the first time in Neptune's 164-year cycle, this combination offers an opportune time for the Christ to prepare or even make his reappearance in accord with the hierarchy's projected externalization sometime after 2025. And what I said before about Neptune staying in Pisces to 2039, there is the window of opportunity, should he choose to take it. But of course, he can come anytime. The hierarchy are continually adjusting and tweaking their plans according to how humanity responds each year to the annually amended plan, is my favorite phrase. It's not, stuck in concrete, that plan. It has to be tweaked and adjusted regularly, depending on humanity's response to the energies that they invoke that are coming through. Of course, I also mentioned regularly that the hierarchy have to allow for the influence of Shambhala, because humanity hitherto in the last, up until just very recently, have been protected by the intense first ray energy emanating from Shambhala, this pure spiritual force. Because the point of this resistance for humanity is to for it to go to their heads in terms of the misuse of power and so forth. But they've chosen to try and accelerate human evolution by allowing that energy from Shambhala direct to humanity now, but without any filter of Shambhala of hierarchy. This is an extraordinary statement that I've read many times, and so this also concerns the so-called Shambhala impacts, 5 of which we have had since the ancient days of Lemuria, 1 for each root race, and yet 2 more in the 20th century, in 1975 and the year 2000. And speculated, therefore, that in another 25-year cycle, in 2025, there will be another Shambhala impact. Perhaps we're already in it now. Perhaps it's the greatest strength of this Shambhala impact will be even greater in over the next year or so. So I've got a blown up map of the previous diagram, which just focuses on the earth, Sanakamara, the so-called Buddhas of activity, the three main departments of the hierarchy, the Manu, Christ, the Mahashohan, and the various masters under that, and the subsidiary Ray ashrams, the 7 Ray ashrams. Then you can see the initiates, disciples, probationers here much more clearly at the bottom. So continuing upon this theme, the phrase in the following quotation mentions members of the hierarchy, which refers to senior disciples, initiates, and the masters from the 7 Ray and sub-Ray ashrams. DK says, how will these members of the hierarchy in their various grades appear on Earth? Will they come through the methods of ordinary birth, of childhood and maturity? Some initiates may follow this ordinary pattern. Some are already passing through it today, which is the late 1940s and 50s, when this was written, and are in the stages of infancy and adolescence. To them will be given a large share of the preparatory work. Some will not pass through these relatively limiting phases, but will pass back and forth between the outer world and the world of hierarchical endeavor. They will be sometimes present in physical bodies and sometimes not. And so this method of activity will not be possible as long as the present rules of national and civilian identification, of passports, and of drastic airport and seaport inspection are required by the authorities. Such people as these transiting initiates would not be able to identify themselves. Of course, since he wrote that, it's got far worse in terms of restrictions for traveling and you know, X-ray body scans and all sorts of searches and so forth. That's got to stop. Enough already, as they say. This form of appearance is therefore postponed for some time. Some of the masters will create what is called in the language of the East, the Maya Varupa, the body of illusion, a vehicle of expression which is built of atomic, physical, and astral substance and of concrete mental substance. This they can create at will, use at will, and cause to vanish at will. Their problem is not therefore so acute in the matter of appearing and of reappearing as is that of the initiate who cannot thus create to suit his purpose and his service. Something in the chat here. Okay, Heidi's just posted a long passage here. The Christ is in the hearts of the servers working within the triangles. Network reinforced through the Buddha, the spirit of peace, and the avatar of synthesis, and through the network, all humanity and the other kingdoms receive the strong energy to help the realizing of the divine plan and to think in an universal manner. Yes, thank you, Heidi. Very well expressed, and a good reminder of the power of triangles. You know, so many people feel impotent and powerless with regard to what can I do? And people who are students of the mysteries who can link, who can join groups, but if they don't want to or cannot join groups online or in their local area, they can simply work subjectively by themselves by linking, by creating triangles. And you can have as many triangles as you like. 1 or 2 or 3 is a good start with other workers, and that strengthens the planetary grid of triangles, of course. You may see some of those pictures I post in my newsletters of the planetary triangular network of light surrounding the entire planet. Maya Varupa, the body of illusion. The appearing of these initiates and masters will begin with isolated members appearing and living amongst humanity, coming forth one by one, doing the required work, returning through the portals of apparent death to the inner subjective ashram, and then again appearing one by one or other of the methods mentioned above. This process has been going on for some time and began around the year 1860. And of course, 1860 is a very important year for several reasons that we'll go into, which will lead us to the consideration in the next session of the extraordinary eclipse which is occurring across the United States on April the 8th. So the importance of 1860 in history and the USA, so of course the American Civil War, over which that great initiate, or racial avatar as DK calls him, Abraham Lincoln, presided. Quite possibly a fourth degree initiate, and a triple Aquarian as well. You can find analysis of his birth chart on my website. But a triple Aquarian for a nation that is an Aquarian soul. And of course, the Civil War, one of its prime themes was the abolition of slavery, which is a very strong second-ray love wisdom theme, I think. The 1860s was also a period when Blavatsky was traveling through Europe, the Americas, and India. The initiate Florence Nightingale, who there's also an analysis about on my website, established her nursing school in London in 1860, revolutionizing nursing. The spiritualist movement was also in full expression, strongly influenced by Neptune's transit through Pisces. Many scientists were making headway or just taking incarnations, such as Marie Curie, pictured over here, Alfred Nobel, James Clerk Maxwell, Joseph Lister, Gregor Mendel, Dmitri Mendeleev, J. Norman Lockyer, the astronomer, Louis Pasteur, and also in literature and the arts, of course. So we're talking about all the different ray ashrams here. Victor Hugo, Leo Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Lewis Carroll, Charles Dickens, George Eliot, Karl Marx. This is Charles Dickens' picture here, quite an interesting looking guy. Love that goatee. Lewis Carroll over here, Dostoevsky down here, and Marie Curie up here, just to name a few. These figures are just a few of those who might be regarded as advanced members of the various ray ashrams that have contributed to the planetary plan. In fact, DK somewhere in the blue books equates the work of Marie Curie and her husband and their work with radium and radioactivity as being on a par with the work of Blavatsky. So definitely initiates of some kind along their particular ray line. These figures, okay, so the seventh ray force of 1860 also came in. There was a seventh ray sub-ray cycle that came in on the sixth ray cycle of the Piscean age. And so that really contributed a lot to because Uranus is the ruler of the seventh ray and the ruler of the Aquarian age, this was a pivotal sort of point, transition, or a time marker in the cuspal period between Pisces and Aquarius. And was accompanied by a potent expression of the second ray of love wisdom, the primary ray of the solar system, and the ray of that ultimate solar hero, the Christ. The Tibetan says here in this long quote I'm going to read out, it's very interesting. The second ray work of teaching is the first to be organized. Subjectively, the first ray workers are already active. The work of the first ray with this disturbing and destroying activity prepares the way. Pain and disruption ever precede birth, and the agents of the first ray have been working for nearly 200 years. So we're talking since the mid-18th century, when he wrote that in the mid-19th century, 20th century. The agents of the second ray, it's interesting, isn't it? Like the secret agents of the second ray started their preparation around the year 1825, but moved outward in force soon after 1860. So you've got a combination of the seventh ray and the second ray working together very powerfully. From that date on, great concepts and new ideas and the modern ideologies and arguments for and against aspects of the truth have characterized modern thought and produced the present mental chaos and the many conflicting schools and ideologies with their attendant movements and organizations. Out of all these, order and truth and new civilization will emerge. Of course, we're in World War III right now with these conflicting mental ideologies, still even more so than when this was written. He continues, he says, the civilization will emerge as the result of mass thinking. It will no longer be a civilization imposed by an oligarchy of any kind. Oligarchy meaning rule by a few. And so, but what's happened since that has been written, the consolidation of materialistic forces has taken place since the 1940s, and imposed oligarchies have emerged in many areas of politics, media, technology, money, etc. The USA and several other nations are regarded as oligarchies, as Jimmy Carter himself has said. We've become an oligarchy instead of a democracy. Because of the influence of the democratic system by powerfully financed corporations and individuals, and therefore the WF, the WHO, and even the United Nations are all examples of institutions which have developed into parasitical oligarchies that determine, dictate, and impose policies not developed or wanted by the general public or voted for. So today, the century-long modern ideologies and arguments, mental chaos, and the many conflicting schools and ideologies continues apace as humanity learns greater discrimination, balances the mental polarities, and expands its consciousness accordingly. Well, I know there's a lot to take in. Any questions or comments thus far, please post them in the chat. We're going to talk about Easter next in a separate section, so I'm just going to pause for a minute or two. In fact, we're going to a break in 10 minutes just to keep up with the original schedule. So we'll cut this session short by 5 minutes. So we have another 10 minutes before the break, I believe. Yes, yes. Just going through the list here, seeing a lot of familiar names. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you here. A few names I haven't seen for a while. Great. All right. So no one has anything to say? Well, I know it's a lot to take in and a lot of information overload almost. We also have a discussion session this evening, our Western European time, after the meditation at 1900. We go through to 1945. So maybe 20, 25 minutes of summary of the day, essentially, as well as any feedback on the group meditation. Okay. Let's move into a discussion about Aries, Easter, and the slain lamb that we mentioned before. The ram of Aries is at first a lamb, a symbol of innocence, humility, trusting, and forgiveness. Of course, forgiveness being a major keynote of the Piscean age and of the sign Pisces. Recalling the biblical verse, verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Of course, the kingdom of heaven is the realm of each and every human soul. That which bars the way are the opposites of the above attributes, such as guilt, treachery, impurity, pride, vengeance, all facets of the human dweller and unintegrated personality. And children, of course, carry that innocence and who have a built-in humility. They haven't learned about pride yet. No matter how many other prideful lives they may have lived, they still carry that essential innocence. And we are all always seeking to cultivate that inner child quality. On the left here, we have the artwork by some unknown artist. I can't find out who it is, that is based upon the inspiration from the Shroud of Turin, where the imprint of some face was left on a piece of linen that covered the body. Heidi says, I would like to share what happens on the small island of Sardinia. There are more and more persons interested to know more about the unknown. Actually, I shall try to create a working group. Excellent. This is a good point because what we're seeing and all the chat forums and all the social media feeds and so forth is an extraordinary interest in the unknown, the unseen, and so many people are exploring ancient civilizations. They have many different theories, and there's many conspiracy theories within all that. But it's a really interesting trend that's really expanded in the last few years. So anyway, just to mention that regarding Heidi's remark. So the other picture below is William Blake's, which I described. There's a description for it in my latest newsletter. The Christ riding a ram, and I forget who the other characters are, but I think the disciple John is one of them. Anyway. Ina says, this is the awakening. It's happening everywhere. People are realizing how much they've been disempowered in the past. They're informing themselves. In the last few years, many people have informed themselves to the point where you could say that's the equivalent of a PhD degree in research. Do your own research, which is often a phrase that is mocked by people who are seeking to tell you what they think is the truth. But it is basically creating an autonomy in humanity, and independence, and an emergence from the mass consciousness, which is ruled over by Cancer, to individuated consciousness, which is ruled over by Leo. And Leo is the polarity of Aquarius, the sign we're moving into. So, of course, there are a lot of shadow aspects that come with that Leo expression and selfishness and self-focus and so forth. But there's also this independent thinking factor that's going on at the same time. And it's very exciting. And the materialistic forces have triggered this in their assault upon humanity mainly since 2020, but over a long period of time. So in the West, Jesus Christ is known as the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, who suffers crucifixion at Calvary to save the world from its sins. And the Lamb also relates to the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world, which has another more esoteric meaning. But the sacrifice of animals is a very ancient tradition, cattle, sheep, goats, etc. In one sense, Christ, the Lamb, is the same as the sacrificial scapegoat that was sent out into the desert carrying the sins of the tribe. And the goat, of course, is a symbol of Capricorn, where the symbolism of the winter solstice, deepest darkness, celebrates the increasing light thereafter, the birth of the soul of Christ consciousness, which, of course, is another sign of the cardinal cross that Aries occupies. Hence, these two signs of the cardinal cross are intimately linked from birth in Capricorn to crucifixion in Aries, celebrated annually at Easter, the first Sunday after the Aries full moon and this year on March 31st. So that's going to be about 6 days after the full moon tomorrow morning. So we note that the month of March contains the root of the word Mars, ruler of Aries and god of war, in which the Romans believed that March was the best month to initiate warfare. And indeed, people have examined this in light of modern warfare, and many invasions have been launched in March. It was under the Roman rule that excuse me, I'll start again. It was under Roman rule that Jesus' crucifixion was carried out during Aries. And of course, esoterically, crucifixion is one of the words for the fourth initiation. The lamb slain before the foundation of the world also concerns the Christ who overshadowed his disciple Jesus, signaling the end of the age of Aries, just before the age of Pisces, and the beginning of the age of Pisces, whose avatar was the Christ. Yet in terms of even greater zodiacal cycles, in the Occident we have, this is a quote again from one of the blue books, we have for long thought in terms of the lamb slain from the foundation of the world, and in this statement lies a profound astrological truth. It refers to that great round of the zodiac, a period of approximately 25,000 years, in which the sun passes through all 12 signs of the zodiac. The period to which reference is made started in the sign Aries, the ram. And so here we have a diagram of the orientation of the North Pole of this Earth to the North Pole star, Polaris, and the various other pole stars like Tuban, Vega, and so forth, that this axis prescribes a circle around over a period of 25,000 years. And there you have the greater zodiacal cycle, where the sun passes, or precesses as it's called, through all 12 signs of the zodiac, but each of 2,160 year increments. And so astronomically, we enter the Aquarian age, as one of the essays on my website described, of the 2117 AD is the astronomical ingress of the sun into Aquarius. And you can read a whole essay about that if you want to find it on my website. Just type in the search 2,117. We are told also elsewhere in, I think it's, might be externalization of the hierarchy, where we are going into a double Aquarian cycle, which has only happened for the 7th time in the history of the 5th root wraith. A very tantalizing statement, that one that I've pondered over many times. But essentially, we are at the start of a 2,160 year cycle of Aquarius, but we are also at the start of a 25,000 year cycle of Aquarius in an even greater zodiac. So it's quite an extraordinary combination or opportunity. So look, I'm going to leave it there for this session. We'll have another 15-minute break, I believe, Inez.
Yes, it's time for.
And then we'll resume for the last session. And then we'll have about, I think it's a 45-minute break, as I recall, till 1900 GMT, and then we'll have the meditation there, where a lot of other people will hopefully join us at that time as well. So I'll leave the screen share up, and I'll let you stop the recording, Inez, and process this next video. Yeah?
Yes.
Very good. For those of you who came to the equinox talk the other night. Must apologize for the quality of the sound of the microphone. We've improved that considerably now, so hopefully there should be no more glitches there, apart from unexplained crashes like we had in the first session today. Luckily, we didn't lose any information on that, which is great. So this next section also includes some material about sunspot activity, which can play havoc with the internet, but we'll get to that. So what I want to talk about first is Easter, the theme of Easter and the resurrection. And of course, resurrection means the raising up, and this sublime painting to the left is by Paolo Veronese, and he is the Venetian master, as in Venice. He's called the Venetian, who is the Chohan, or the custodian of the third ray of active intelligence. There's little known about him except for this incarnation, we are told, and this extraordinary painting of the resurrection. Many other Italian artists too have done some extraordinary versions of this theme, the resurrection. Is the keynote of nature. Death is not. The note and message sounded by the Christ when last on earth was resurrection. During the coming century, the meaning of resurrection will be unfolded and the new age will reveal its true significance. As humanity emerges from the death of old ideas and modes of living, relinquishing its materialistic goals and its damning selfishness, it will enter the clear light of the resurrection life. Resurrection is the clue to the world of meaning and is the fundamental theme of all world religions, past, present, and future. Resurrection of the spirit of man in all forms, in all kingdoms, is the objective of the entire evolutionary process and involves liberation from materialism and selfishness. Of course, there are many biblical sayings like this, if I be raised up, I raise all men unto me, and things like that. The main message about Easter is not about the agony of the crucifixion or the blood sacrifice, which of course churchianity has emphasized. Better to use the term renunciation. The real message is about the resurrection. DK continues, he says, it was also to the magnetic power of the will that Christ referred when he said, I, if I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. This had no reference to the crucifixion, but to the magnetic will of the Christ to draw all men through the life of the indwelling Christ in every heart, out of the world of material values into the world of spiritual recognitions. It did not relate to death but to life. It had no reference to the cross but to the resurrection. In the past, the keynote of the Christian religion has been death, symbolized for us in the death of Christ, and the much distorted by St. Paul in his effort to blend the new religion which Christ brought with the old blood religion of the Jews. Paul was Jewish, of course, and had that magical moment on the road to Damascus where he took the third initiation. But he was a Scorpio, and we are told by the Tibetan that he distorted a lot of created those distortions through that lens of, which of course is a major sign of initiation. To the right here, we have a picture of the Easter egg, essentially. The sun is exalted in Aries, hence the yolk of the egg is its symbol. And of course, it's the rising sun every day that we see. And hence, of course, Easter eggs. And the rooster who fertilized that egg heralds the rising sun at dawn every day. And hence is a great symbol of Aries and has the red crest on its head, not unlike the Roman warrior's helmet. Very interesting. At least the rooster is supposed to herald the coming sun, but quite often it's a few hours early at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on what roosters you have in your neighborhood. So this quote continues on the following page. In the cycle which Christ will inaugurate after his reappearance, the goal of all the religious teaching in the world will be the resurrection of the spirit in mankind. The emphasis will be upon the livingness of the Christ nature in every human being and upon the use of the will in bringing about this living transfiguration of the lower nature. Very powerful statement there. It also brings a lot of humility in terms of where we feel we're at any particular stage, or what we're expressing or what we're not expressing. So my commentary here is technically the ascension concerns the sixth initiation after the fifth degree, which is the resurrection, where the candidate becomes a master of the wisdom. Jesus took the fifth initiation in the next incarnation as Apollonius of Tyana, ironically amongst the Romans, with which there was some sort of karma, if that can be used as the right word, that was created in that life with the Romans as Jesus. And if you get a hold of any of the literature about Apollonius of Tyana, he performed many miracles in public. To be seen talking to a big crowd in one city and simultaneously being in another city witnessed by another crowd. Such as the scope of movement of a master of wisdom, has mastery over the form. And of course, we have this wonderful depiction of the, I guess it's the Last Supper by Salvador Dali. I'm not quite sure what the exact name of this picture is, but of course the Ascension is depicted by the outstretched arms above here. Well, it's also the crucifixion, but it's like it's got an ascending theme to it. And it's within a dodecahedron geometrical shape that is 12 five-sided pentagons joined together, which is the shape of the universe, Plato tells us. Right, anything else before we move on? We're going to talk about 1860 again. Well, do put it in the chat if you wish to ask or clarify anything. So, we touched upon Neptune and Pisces before being present in 1860. So this is called 1860 and 2024 solar storms in Neptune. In 1859, there was a massive solar storm, just a year or less before 1860. A monster sunspot that birthed the Carrington event, thought to be the largest storm in recorded history to hit the Earth. As the storm coincided with the American Civil War, the Tibetan commented upon USA's global position at that time. He said, "This isolationist spirit was one of the dangers to which the neutral powers were at one time prone, particularly the United States, and the physical warning as to this danger was given to them in the magnetic storms which severed contact between them and Europe and dislocated their relationship between the states within America itself." What an extraordinary statement. And an exact replication of that event is coming up very soon in the next few weeks, I think. Possibility and potential for that is huge, as I'll go on to explain. That electromagnetic storm no doubt magnified the second ray of love wisdom that moved upward in force since after 1860, and which is also the solar ray of the USA. Of course, what happens in the USA affects the whole world. And the USA's current crisis in terms of its sole direction is is particularly pertinent for everyone on the planet. The sun is the co-ruler of the second ray of love wisdom and esoterically veils the energy of Neptune that was transiting through its own sign of Pisces at the time of the Carrington event. Neptune in Pisces also had a strong influence on the development of the spiritual psychic movement, as I've said, and is one of the names, spiritually speaking, of the Christ himself. Here we have some magnificent photos of some of the solar flares that come out of the sun, which of course follow an 11-year cycle of peaks and troughs. Here is an artist's depiction. I don't think it's a photograph, although it might. In 1859, I'm not sure whether they'd quite developed photography then. I know it was a few years later at least, but anyway, it's an extraordinary depiction of the aurora borealis created by the magnetic influence on the poles, and everyone out to look at it. It's like, I think it's nighttime with all the stars there in the sky, but it's like daytime in this particular part because there's so much light in the sky. So throughout 2023-24, Neptune has been hovering at the same degree as Neptune in 1859 because Neptune has a 164-year cycle. From mid-April 2023 to mid-February 2024, it was the Neptune return of the Carrington event horoscope. And this ties in with the fact that recent solar flares that interrupted internet services in February, March 24, some of us may have experienced this. Meta went down a couple of weeks ago. No, we might have been some other reason, but point to a similar Carrington event in early April, just a few days before the Aries new moon total solar eclipse on April the 8th. And I'm quoting here from a website, Sunspot AR3590, which recently spit out at least 3 X-class solar flares. This is solar flare jargon, of course. In under 24 hours has grown even larger and is now pointed almost directly at Earth, putting us in the crosshairs of more potential eruptions. All 3 flares caused temporary radio blackouts on Earth, but none of them launched coronal mass ejections, or CMEs, clouds of magnetized plasma that can slam into our planet's magnetic shield as they fly through space. And we can see this plasma here in this remarkable photograph. Like a dragon, a fiery dragon, is it not? Disturbances in Earth's magnetic field that can allow solar radiation to impact ground-based infrastructure, trigger stunning auroral displays, and cause satellites to tumble back to Earth, clear signs that the sun is fast approaching the explosive peak in its roughly 11-year cycle known as solar maximum. Scientists now think that solar maximum could arrive within the first half of this year, 2024. It will also likely be much more powerful than scientists initially expected, unquote. And here is Neptune, the return of Neptune by, I think it's a British artist. I think it's the credit I give in my latest newsletter. Extraordinary photo. Neptune with his chariot, pulled by seahorses, surrounded by various cherubs and angels. And this guy over here, this, well, there's the Capricorn goat, actually, the half man, half goat, blowing his horn, his cornucopia. Other various symbols and creatures around. And of course, Neptune is holding in his hand an orb, a bit like the orb that is depicted in some of the paintings of Christ that he holds in his hand. So similar to the 1859-1860 event, the forces of Sun Neptune may reunite an intense stimulation upon humanity, especially for second-range solar nations like the USA and Britain. Although ruler of the 6th ray of idealism, Neptune, which is USA's personality ray, Neptune is regarded as the second aspect planet. And so being veiled by the sun, as I mentioned before, we may get a huge blast of Neptunian energy, which is basically the Christ force or the Buddhic force, which we call intuition. Currently, these nations are prominent on the world stage. Britain and the USA, according to some observers, have lost their moral compass, a disconnect with the crystallized personality, preventing soul force from flowing through. A powerful magnetic solar storm might be, as the musician Donovan once sung, the intergalactic laxative for any nation's cosmic constipation. It's a very funny song that you can find on YouTube from Donovan's album Cosmic Wheels. For those of you in my generation, you might get a good laugh of that, or for any generation, hopefully. The intergalactic laxative that will get you from here to Mars, as one of the lines goes. When you're out there in the stars, is another line. Anyway, the sun veils also Uranus, we are told by the Tibetan, when he's talking about Leo and the triple rulership of the sun by the sun of Leo. The sun rules Leo exoterically, it veils Neptune esoterically, and it veils Uranus hierarchically. And of course, Uranus is associated with electricity. So solar storms, electricity, and Uranus is also relevant here. And Uranus rules electrical activity and chaotic disruptions and is esoterically veiled by the sun. So it was also very prominent in the 1859 event, as detailed in an earlier newsletter that I wrote a few years ago. And again, I'm describing what happened in this quote. An incredible storm of charged particles sent by the sun slammed into Earth's atmosphere, overpowered it, and caused havoc on the ground. Telegraph wires suddenly shorted out the United States and Europe, igniting widespread fires. Colorful aurora, normally only visible in polar regions, was seen as far south as Cuba and Hawaii. The Earth's magnetic field normally protects the surface of the planet from some storms. In 1859, the planet's defenses were totally overwhelmed. If a storm that severe occurred today, it could cause up to 2 trillion in initial damages by crippling communications on Earth and fueling chaos among residents and even governments in a scenario that would require 4 to 10 years for recovery. I don't think that's an exaggeration. 1860 was the USA's first Uranus return on its 84-year cycle since 1776, and its natal position of Uranus is 8 degrees Gemini. So on September the 2nd, 1859, when the Carrington event occurred, transiting Sun in Virgo was squaring USA's Uranus, also ruler of that nation's Aquarian soul. So a marvelous point of tension from which to launch the seventh ray subcycle of 1860, given the fact that Uranus is the ruler of the seventh ray. And so with all the above subheadings under the main heading, the imminent externalization of the hierarchy, it might be tempting to say that the externalization could be preceded by a major solar storm event, even if the actual externalization is some years away. And this is very interesting because a lot of people are sensing that some big thing is going to happen soon. Some of them are saying it's going to be a black swan event where some scheme is cooked up and unleashed upon humanity. Others are sensing something like this, a natural phenomenon. And I think many people are sensing the returning of the Christ. I'm having some extraordinary conversations lately with people who use the word Christ, who I wouldn't expect them to use. Many people, many Christians are talking about the Christ return as well. These are Orthodox Christians, and not necessarily evangelicals who also say the same thing. So there's a general sensing all around that there's a huge event about to happen. And of course, when the Christ does return, as they say in the Bible, all eyes shall see him. And the Tibetans suggest that he will fly from his retreat in Central Asia by plane. He will come in the air as the part of that biblical injunction says, and all eyes will see him on television. That may happen sooner rather than later, or it may be delayed. We don't know. But there's a huge invocation going on by humanity for the return of the Christ at the moment, generally speaking, in esoteric and non-esoteric circles. And from all the people that are awakening at the moment in the last few years and taking the first degree initiation, which is essentially the recognition of the birth of the Christ consciousness within the heart. So can we imagine the chaos that would ensue if the global internet or electricity grid crashed for days, weeks, or even months? It has been suggested that certain material forces might attempt this, but a naturally occurring storm would throw everyone completely off balance. This is the nature of unpredictable Uranus. Of course, in this picture here, we have the linking, the electronic linking of the World Wide Web, if you like, the various nodes in the nations that link the whole planet. This is the nature of unpredictable Uranus that throws a curveball from left field, as they say in America in baseball. Comes out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere, suddenly disrupting, turning the tables upside down. There was something I wanted to comment on there. What was it? Of course, Uranus, excuse me, Uranus is the planet of revolution, reform, renewal, change, and is currently going through the sign of Taurus. And also we're coming up to a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which I mentioned soon, which is just after this amazing total solar eclipse. Here is the eclipse line depicted starting over near Europe, near Portugal actually, or Ireland in the Atlantic, and going clear across the United States, the main nation in the world that this is affecting, going through major capital cities, Washington, New York City. And this Aries new moon chart has a huge stellium, sun and moon, of course, conjunct in Aries, Chiron in Aries, Vulcan in Aries, Mercury, the esoteric ruler of Aries, in this sign as well, including the North Node, the moon's North Node, which is always near the sun and moon at an eclipse. So this chart, several planets in Pisces, also Venus in Aries, several planets in Pisces. So this extraordinary stellium of planets over three signs, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus, is called a bucket in astrological parlance. Here is the bucket, and the Earth in Libra is the handle of the bucket. The one redeeming feature, you could say, this chart is set for New York City, but it would be a different rising sign for London, for instance. This is Leo rising, which is appropriate for the solar eclipse, given the fact that the sun is the ruler of Leo. And I'll come back to that in a minute. So what follows less than 2 weeks later, on the 20th, well, basically from the 17th to the 21st of April, Jupiter and Uranus will be in a relatively rare conjunction because their cycles are 84 years and 12 years respectively, will be closely conjunct between the 17th and 21st in the same degree of Taurus, the 22nd degree of Taurus, which will aspect many things. For instance, the sun in Israel's chart will be aspected. It will oppose some important planets in Russia's chart, and no doubt many other nations and individuals' charts around the world. Jupiter will supercharge the effect of Uranus And the effects of both planets will be very strong from April the 8th to May the 8th. In other words, from the solar eclipse, even before that, if we take into account the increased activity of these solar flares in the first few days of April, which were predicted, that lead up to the solar eclipse on the 8th itself. So for another 4 weeks after that through to May the 8th, extraordinary influences through the solar eclipse and through the conjunction of Uranus and Jupiter, which of course are the exoteric and esoteric rulers of Aquarius, the sole purpose of, or the soul of USA, who's destined to be a leader into the Aquarian age, a bearer of light into the age of Aquarius, as of course the Statue of Liberty is symbolized by. So given that Taurus is closely connected to money and Uranus to the financial system, there could be a major money crisis during this period, triggered by a solar storm or other earthly forces. And I have other essays on my website, such as Uranus and Taurus, Revolution of the Monetary System, Uranus and Money, Uranus and Taurus and the Underworld, that can be found on my website. Taurus being traditionally connected to money, material things. But of course, Taurus is also the mother of illumination. Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus can bring a huge flash of light or illumination around the planet. So there's the smaller map, or the general map of the eclipse line. There are radiating lines either side of this. So the eclipse will be visible from most parts of North America. Here's the chart again, set for New York City, Venus North Node, Moon, Sun, Chiron, Vulcan, and Mercury. This chart has a classic bucket formation, etc., etc. But Libra, of course, is the peacemaker. Aries is the sign of the warrior and war, ruled by Mars. So, of course, these forces of materialism use astrology to launch their schemes and their manipulations of humanity. No question about that. They have astrologers advising them for sure. I've commented on that many times in the last 20 years. So we wait and see, and we will be ready for whatever is thrown at us, if anything, through scheming or through natural cataclysm. Because it is argued that the inability to change by many nations, one of the four techniques the hierarchy will use, if that occurs, if humanity is so stuck, is natural cataclysms that will shake things up and force changes, like earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and so forth. I have mentioned this in my past newsletters. Okay. So the total solar eclipse line passes close to New York, Washington, Chicago, Kansas City, and these are four of the nation's main chakras, respectively the throat, head, solar plexus, and speculatively the Ajna Center for Kansas City. I outline this in this particular essay that you can find on my website underneath the heading of nations or something like that, I think it is. I talk about the 5 planetary centers as well in an essay that's linked to this. But this is the 5 centers USA. New York City, the throat center. But internationally, the Ajna Center of the 5 planetary centers. Washington, obviously the head center, the place of political power. Chicago, the solar plexus, which is interesting given the fact that it's placed in the whole of the Great Lakes area, the water being a symbol of the astral body. Los Angeles, the as yet unawakened heart center, and Kansas City, a jewel city, in fact, spanning a river. I think it's the Missouri or the Mississippi. I can't remember. My US geography is not so good. So, but Los Angeles is USA's heart center and is well within orb of influence to the main eclipse line in the map below, in the zone of partial eclipse lines. Hence, all of the USA's 5 chakras will be activated on this solar eclipse, which might also be supercharged by extra solar flare sunspot activity, even in a possible Carrington event. Many other cities fall directly on the main eclipse line: Burlington, Buffalo, Detroit, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Little Rock, Dallas, to name a few. Most of the nation is in influence from the eclipse. And in USA's contentious election year, the nation's host of national and international problems, this solar eclipse is bound to be transformative, but most likely very chaotic for the nation. And there is the close-up map of the radiating lines. The central dark line here is the main eclipse path, but all these other lines are in orb of influence of the main line. So the entire nation, including Canada and Mexico, and Central America, in fact, will be deeply affected by this eclipse. But you can see how close the main eclipse line goes to New York City and Washington, and Chicago just over here as well. Extraordinary. And through Kansas down here. And one of the disturbing factors, unfortunately, is that the authorities are starting to beat this eclipse up in a way, in a kind of an ancient superstitious kind of way. They're talking about getting the National Guard out, thousands of troops and so forth, to deal with possibility of electrical problems, possibility of overcrowding, of big crowds turning out in traffic, turning out to see the eclipse, all this kind of thing. There's a bit of hysteria being generated at the moment about that, which we all have to be careful about, obviously. But there's no question that many divisive issues will come to a head, especially with the Aries stellium squaring USA's Cancer Sun. That is natally square to Saturn in Libra, the Lord of Karma in the scales of justice. Hence, the new moon stimulation of this Saturn square Sun aspect may bring some kind of karmic reckoning within the nation. In a 2010 missive, I commented on the hard nature of Sun square Saturn in USA's horoscope. Relentless and unforgiving, with an added, quote, corruption and manipulation of the law that has had the effect of severely undermining the democratic system. And we said before how Jimmy Carter was quoting that the USA now is no longer a democracy; it's turned into another ocracy, an oligarchy. In the new moon eclipse horoscope above, set for New York City, most of this Aries stellium falls in the 9th house of foreign affairs, as you can see here. Excuse me. Ninth house of foreign affairs, hence a crisis may be reached regarding Aries-like aggression towards other nations like Russia and China. Now, some of you may think that I'm biased or that I hate USA. I actually love this nation. I've lived there for a total of a few years in various of my trips there in the last 20 years. And I always write from the point of view of empowering its sole purpose of Aquarius and sure, being critical of its policies and so forth. Various observers are currently saying that the USA is set upon a suicide course through its continual provocation of these nations, particularly Russia, where one red line after another has been crossed by fanatical generals at the Pentagon and NATO, compounded by loose talk, nuclear saber rattling, and US military on the ground in Ukraine, as well as, of course, the machinations of the CIA and the Pentagon, who are not working in USA's sole interest whatsoever and have not been for a very long time, in my humble opinion. It appears that various other agencies, such as the CIA, are executing their plans with impunity. Among recent revelations that they have been building bases in Ukraine along the Russian border for the past 10 years, not to mention the continual interference in foreign nations since the 1950s. At least 50 nations have been interfered with by the CIA, including, of course, most recently Ukraine. What also feeds into USA's Saturn karma scenario, with this Sun square Saturn pattern being activated by the eclipse, is its unconditional support, arms, and financial supply to Israel. In 6 months, this rogue state of Israel has cruelly slaughtered over 30,000 Palestinians and destroyed Gaza almost entirely. Hence, USA bears some major responsibility for what has occurred. Despite its protestations, too little too late, I think, in the last few weeks. And of course, I've done many reports about this that you can find in my past newsletters about Israel and Palestine for the last 20 years, in fact. So we are coming to quite a, everything's coming to a head, as they say, in this crisis just before 2025, where the planetary dweller on the threshold is revealed in all its nastiness. And we have all contributed to that, no exceptions. All of us have contributed to this over thousands and thousands of years, to the situation we find ourselves in now. We can't blame the USA. We can't blame Israel. We can't blame Russia. We are all implicitly involved with this. And it's up to all of us who have that kind of awareness to go about fixing it in some way. So I just have a few other comments there. It's ironic that US politicians are impotently squeaking to Israel that is crossing one red line after another regarding Israel's further bombardment of Palestinians, whilst approving yet billions more in arms funding. There's so much hypocrisy, obvious hypocrisy and contradictions with regard to a lot of the world politics. So let us pray that Libra the peacemaker, polarity of gung-ho Aries, will prevail in this new moon chart with so many planets in Aries over the warmongers who play like children with nuclear dice, perpetuating a continuous cycle of fear and trepidation for the rest of the planet. Any questions or comments so far? Whoops. All right, where was I? Oh yeah, here we go. All right, so we have plenty of time, I think, till what, 5:30 is it, Ines, before we finish this session? Or 5:15?
5:45, but don't forget to change into presentation mode because you took it out of presentation mode, please. But yes, it's
yeah.
5, I guess.
When did we start this session? 4:30. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
5:45. So we've got plenty of time to go over the entire day after we finish this next section. and plenty of time to ask questions. I really urge you to make some statements associated with this day only, or questions, because that usually generates a good feedback. USA's other main issue is national. As a result of political investment and regime changes in so many other nations, the US debt is now around 34 trillion. It's almost an unimaginable figure. Hence, infrastructure and education in all states have been grossly neglected, combined with a host of other social problems. USA is a Gemini personality, the zodiac sign known as the Warring Brothers, the soul and personality in conflict. Personality that often goes upon its willful way, oblivious to the voice of the soul. Can it be said that the USA is totally aligned with its Aquarian soul purpose, or completely driven by an errant Gemini personality? The same goes for Britain too. I would propose, in its Taurus personality, out of alignment with its Gemini soul. But some promising things are happening there, as they are in the United States. The US is deeply divided on a multitude of issues, and the warring Gemini brothers can be seen as Biden and Trump, with Trump currently 1.6% ahead as of March the 13th. This divisiveness was on display at the recent Oscars presentations, where Trump supporters were lampooned to an approving audience. As other commentators have observed, elitist Hollywood was on show to a nation, missing the irony that half of that nation will vote for Trump. In fact, the predictions for him winning are very much played down by the mainstream media, but who basically support the left. But and I have no favoritism either way, of course. Myself, learning to be apolitical in the last few years, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But even Trump has a much better chance astrologically, I've mentioned in a newsletter last year, of winning this election, unless they bump him off, unless the CIA takes him out before then. So it's going to be a rollicking, rough ride this year for the USA and for the world as a whole, as we ride out this forerunner to 2025. So with USA's progressed sun in Pisces, the theme of forgiveness of one brother to another must be invoked if the nation is to survive and thrive. Because, you know, I continually see more regular reports about speculation about civil war in the United States, about secession of certain states from the rest of the country, and so forth. The divide is very, very deep. But it may take a catastrophic event to stop the nation in its tracks, forcing reconciliation, thereby invoking USA's Aquarian soul theme, brotherhood and community. Giselle says, thank you for showing us the solar eclipse chart and the info to what to expect. We'll think on my USA friends attending events in Texas on April the 8th for the solar eclipse. We'll pass on them to ponder upon. And of course, thank you for that. It reminds me also, when an eclipse occurs, it doesn't necessarily mean that something will happen at that time. Quite often, an eclipse can be triggered 6 months or 12 months later by a transit of a planet across that eclipse point. But of course, a total solar eclipse is a blackout. It means it's darkness, and there is the ancient superstition of fear. There was reportedly an eclipse at the crucifixion of Jesus. And you know, this is related in the Bible. It's a contentious theory, but a lot of people say it was true. Other people argue against that. But so when the earth goes dark, then animals panic, because their natural rhythm is upset. They don't know what's going on, and people panic. There is fear that comes, and so the fact that this eclipse is being stirred up by media, some media, not all, in terms of some diabolical thing that will happen, and that might happen anyway, is interesting to watch and to not plug into too much. Giselle also says, my friends attending the events are going in community and no fear. Good to hear. So the forcing of reconciliation in the US. You can see this election chart, the red Republicans, the blue for the Democrats, pretty evenly divided with 16% undecided. And of course, Americans are not, it's not compulsory to vote in the USA. So quite often, a much smaller percentage of the eligible voting public turn out for elections. But I think they're really encouraging on both sides now to have campaigns to get people to vote. The last election was a farce, and that's a very contentious issue too, the election of 2020. There were vast numbers of people in lines around the block waiting for a whole day to vote. There were voting machines that broke down. There were all sorts of excuses. There was a rigging of the electronic vote, apparently, and so forth and so on. We have to go back to the paper ballot, no question about that. But even that, of course, can be manipulated. But it's a trend that a lot of people are talking about in other countries too. Tara says, what about Kennedy? You're talking about Bobby Kennedy Jr. He is gaining an incredible amount of popularity at the moment, I believe, and is a powerful voice in the USA, even though he's fallen down on a few things like the policy towards Israel. He lost a lot of supporters over that, but it's good to see his voice being heard and people supporting him. So it's going to be a very interesting election because there are other dark horses, politically speaking, that will emerge in this this run up to the election, who may come into positions of power. All sorts of speculation about certain conspiracies that may take place too. You have to kind of just sift all these through the sieve of discrimination. Yes, so I'm not sure what you mean by Tara, Lynn. Are you asking someone else? Anyway, so the the key factor that must be borne in mind at the moment is that the Aries energy of this full moon and of the new moon is not misused and abused by the forces that are in power, the forces of aggression that create unnecessary aggression in other nations. Oh, I see. You're watching this with Lynn. Oh, Tara. Okay, sorry. Now I know. Lynn and Tara from Ojai. Lovely to see you here, friends. So Lynn is one of the people that sends me many links to amazing articles of just trying to keep up with what's going on in these last 5 years. The rapid changes that are taking place, some of the best commentators around that are doing extraordinary work. One of the ones I can recommend is Russell Brand, previous movie star, media personality, who is absolutely on fire at the moment as a Gemini with Libra rising. his recent interview with George Galloway, who just won the election in a local election in Britain, was extraordinary. There are people like them who are absolutely hitting their stride at the moment with regard to exposing the deep state, exposing the corruption in politics, but also giving a lot of inspiration to people. And I wouldn't be surprised if George Galloway, well, I wrote on one forum yesterday, George GG for PM, George Galloway for PM, not because he's on the left or on the right, but because of the quality of the ethics and principles that he stands for and espouses, as does Russell Brand and many other great commentators. I have a list that I created on my website, which has grown enormously now, of alternative media. If you go into, I think it's the Ageless Wisdom heading on my website, and scroll down to independent media, something like that, click on that, it'll take you to a page of all the best sources that I use. But of course, I also use the mainstream media sources. I peruse The Guardian in Britain every day to see what the latest lies they are telling us all, and how they spin stories just so blatantly. So I cover the whole spectrum from left to right of media to try and give as Fox News used to say, a fair and balanced view. Anyway, whoops, that was the last page, I believe. So there you have it. And we can, where are we now? Hang on, just go back to my reading view screen. Now we have time for further discussion, plenty of time for further discussion or going over the previous 3 sessions of the day. While you're formulating your questions or comments in the chat, I can just scroll back to the beginning of the presentations for today. Some of you might have missed the beginning. Okay, it's a fair bit of material here, isn't it? So we started off with the colorized picture of Shigats. I didn't quite detail everything, and apparently this is the Master Moya here riding his white horse. And of course, there are some doorways in here of dwellings. It's like a triple dwelling here. I'm not sure if it's all one dwelling or a series of dwellings. Apparently over here, standing up to his knees in the lake, is the Master DK. Maybe he's doing a spot of fishing or the washing up. I don't know. But this is in this lush valley, hidden away in the Himalayas, and impossible to find for any aspiring pilgrim, because it is surrounded by a magnetic wall that will repel any visitors, we are told. I think Kutumi's in this picture somewhere, but it's not a very good. Might be him down here. Anyway, those 3 masters have DK is regarded as the messenger of the masters, who mediates and attends to and helps, of course, the Masters Moya and Kutumi, the show hands or custodians of the first ray of willpower, second ray of love wisdom on this planet. Quite an extraordinary thing to consider. And this reminds me of something else I wanted to say before. Can we imagine if the masters return into physical bodies, into society, in all the different levels and occupations, in politics, in sciences, in the arts, education, and so forth? What it'd be like to stand in their presence? Could you bear the intensity of their vibration, which they can turn on and off at will, of course, depending on who is in the vicinity? In the chat here, we have Eric saying, what would you answer to people who are questioning the masters as another external authority and who are going fiercely for only inner authority. External masters who decide if we are ready in 2025 is questioned as if we are judged and that kind of stuff. I think that's a very fair question. And people have the free will to reject that or not. I find I come up against this quite a bit because I use the authority of the masters transmitting their wisdom through Blavatsky and Bailey as my benchmark for the hidden history of humanity work and the longer cycles of time that they talk about and so forth. For instance, the dating of the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, it's 78,000 years ago that it was built, whereas mainstream or even alternative archaeology sticks to around about a measly 5,000 years BC. So unless they recognize that authority, and many of these alternative archaeologists, for instance, are very suspicious of that authority because of all the stories that swirl around Blavatsky regarding the use of certain words, the people who have tried to undermine her for the last century and so forth. So people have to come to a point of internal recognition, resonance with what is written by the masters, whether it's through Helena Rurik, Alice Bailey, Blavatsky, Florence Ledoux, in the Hilarion teachings and so forth. Another message here from Matt, who says, thanks for today. Could you clarify the details around the re-emergence of the Christ on the planet, such as how the process unfolds with Kutumi overshadowing the avatar? You mentioned the body could already be being formed today. Thanks. Well, as far as I understand, Matt, the Masters Kutumi, Moya, and DK are already in physical bodies, as is the Master Jesus inhabiting a Syrian body, and Master Hilarion, some of the main masters that we know about. And of course, the discarding or appropriating of another body would be, a very easy thing for them to do, whether they want to create a Maya Varupa or indeed another specially built body to reincarnate and to externalize. And apparently we are told that the Christ is working on a very particular type of specific body to reincarnate. And maybe he, quote unquote, will return as a she. We don't know what gender, God forbid, but it's transgender, but he, the expectation is that he will return as a he, but who knows? It would be quite appropriate to return in a feminine form. Quite appropriate, I think. Anyway, just to answer the rest of that question, Inez says, I don't think these masters will be born per se. I think they will materialize using another body. Well, we're told that they will use the normal processes of birth, of incarnating, gestating for 9 months, being born, being raised as children. We're told, I think I read that quote out earlier. But they will also create Maya Varupas to work on the outer plane and then go back to the inner planes. Rita says, physical body, meaning etheric body. No, meaning physical body. Physical incarnation. This is what DK makes a couple of statements about in the Blue Book, that the Christ will take a physical body. And this will be the culmination of the externalization of all the disciples and initiates and the other masters first, before he reappears. And that could take a few decades of organization. I know all the disciples on the inner planes are working hard at this at the moment, but there may need to be a batch of other disciples who are currently incarnate to disincarnate and to reincarnate. So, and that, therefore, that process may take a few decades. We don't really know. The whole idea of the Christ or the Masters creating an intervention by coming earlier than planned is one that many disciples on the path hope for and wish for. But what that does, if that happens, it takes the responsibility away from us, where they basically tend to us like children, and we don't step up to do the work that we're expected to do as co-workers of the hierarchy, as aspiring disciples of the hierarchy. That's why they're watching and waiting very closely right now, I believe, sifting us all and testing us to the max. This is a major initiation we're all going through en masse as humanity, and all the various grades of probationers, aspirants, disciples, and initiates who are who basically the working part of hierarchy, who are working at the coalface. Heidi says, I think that we should take all masters and ancient disciples as an example. Indeed, people I mentioned before, like JFK, Doug Hammarskjöld, the the very few examples I gave of Marie Curie and Lewis Carroll and Mendeleev and Dostoevsky, etc., in all the different fields of human expression. And be at their disposal for service. In fact, indeed, in recognizing some of those disciples in the world today. Yaris Vakulis, I can't pronounce his name properly, the Greek guy, is an obvious world disciple, I think. And many people are recognizing his work in the area of finance and supporting him. He's just one of many people who are doing great work, who don't always necessarily have agreement of views consonant with one's own, but are working sincerely and potently in terms of transforming the financial system, and talking about spirituality and the soul. Michael says Tolstoy's coffee house at Surat is outstanding. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about that in the chat, Michael. I haven't heard of that. It's like a philosophical meeting place, I suspect you're talking about. A short story. Oh, okay. Very good. So there is the picture of Sugat, which gives us a sense of, I'm not sure what that white mountain is in the background. It's certainly one of the mountains in the Himalayas. We talked about the structure of hierarchy, Shambhala, hierarchy, humanity, and the groups between these centers. The extraplanetary, divine intermediaries, cosmic intermediaries in this group here. The intermediate between cosmos and Shambhala. The Nirmanakayas, the divine contemplatives, who intermediate or mediate, I should say, between Shambhala and hierarchy, and of course the new group of world servers, the spiritual agents, or the not so secret agents, of which we all are part of or aspire to be in, that mediate between hierarchy and humanity. And of course we have the thinkers and scientists as well, who are the leading mentally developed, if you like, the fifth root race types that are somewhat leaders of humanity. Then under that we have the so-called three subhuman kingdoms in nature, so-called the animal, vegetable, and mineral kingdoms. All of them evolving entities in their own right. A couple more mentioned in the chat here. Michael says, takes almost every excuse to being separate, best to task excuse me, takes almost every excuse for being separate or best to task. About a 20-minute listen on YouTube is this book of Tolstoy that you're talking about. Thank you. Might be worth checking out. The problem today, of course, is that we all have such a short attention span. We're all bombarded by so much media. We all need to have 1 week or 10-day retreats without any electronica. So it's a fine line between keeping up with what's going on and yet at the same time standing aloof or detached from all that. Now, Giselle is saying that the Diva Kingdom substance you showed us in the last newsletter can help clear space here so we can receive the energies flowing. Hang on a minute, I'm just trying this. Flowing in since spring equinox, the air skies here in Toronto have been really clear. I hear from friends in England who saw dragons last few years, a good sign, I hope. Yeah, I often see dragons being scried in the sky in these smoke-like kind of wispy apparitions around the equinoxes and solstices. Michael says, during the meditation, this figure superimposed with the earth. I'm not sure what figure you're talking about there, Michael. It's a Divic type of figure, or anyway, one new message. The flower of life. Oh, thank you. Okay. Yeah. I saw the original carving of that in stone in Egypt. What's the place called? Abydos. Quite extraordinary. So then we looked at some of the pictures of the masters, of course, that most of you are familiar with. Some of the paintings here. This one by Titian, another Italian artist who's created some sublime pictures of the Christ. I think this other one's by Titian as well, the one next to it. Yes, and then you have Jesus in the Mountains by Nicholas Roerich, Count Saint Germain by Nicholas Thomas, Count Rakotsky by Adam Magnocchi, Count Saint Germain, Artist Unknown, Master Moya by Hermann Schmecken, and likewise Marta Kutumi. And the artist for the Dwaj Kul picture is Annie Garland, and there's a whole section on my website about that you can look at. Do I think the picture of HPB is real? Well, it's a real painting that someone's done, I think, and it resembles her appearance, her hairstyle. There are various pictures of her, of course. The classic picture with her head in her hand is been repeated in various other depictions of her. But I don't know. I don't really know the story behind this particular painting. I take it with a grain of salt. But Kutumi and Moya are depicted a la the Schmecken painting here, and Master R is depicted quite accurately in terms of DK's description about him, that he's a small, slim figure with a pointed black beard, and also resembles this other picture here. This is in fact a blow up of that picture here. From a photo, Eric's saying, okay. Yeah, maybe it is a photo, I'm not sure. I'd love to know if anyone finds out the history of that picture, it'd be interesting to find out. So we went through the hierarchical structure. It's always good to bear in mind. It becomes, I think, occultism really fills in the gaps to our mystical intuition and mystical perception. And so knowing the occultism, the spiritual laws that have been dictated to us or given gifted to us, if you like, through the Alice Bailey teachings is just, well, pure gold, really, isn't it? We talked about the New World religion, a few more Rurik paintings. I'm having trouble with my earpiece here. You can still hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. We talked about the Diva Kingdom and how the masters will give humanity much teaching about working with the Divas consciously, the archangels and all the lesser Divic beings or angelic beings, especially in with regard to self-healing and nourishment. Talked about the three main areas of Masonry, church, and education. The externalization of the ashrams for the first time since Atlantean days, an extraordinarily long time. In Esoteric Psychology 1, I think it is, by Alice Bailey, DK does mention that he mentions the word millions of years. And from my study of the Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky, I got it down to a very close figure of almost 4 million years. Eric has posted the photo here. This would be photo and a description underneath it if you click upon it. This magnificent picture was taken in Ajar, India, about 85 years ago, from the time it was taken, of course. Picture of the great soul, Madame Blavatsky, and the three masters with whom she worked to found the Theosophical Society. These great ones are shown as they appeared in the physical at that time, reading from left to right. They are the Lord Kutumi, Lord Moya, and Lord Saint Germain. Thank you very much for that. And it's a better photo, that one, actually. It's not so distorted or pixelated, but there may be even better ones around. So keep your eyes peeled for those. Now, I don't know whether anyone could see that on their screen, but I just double clicked on it. Just going back to the chat, and underneath that, no, that was it. Okay. Thank you, Eric. That's a good clarification there. Ajar, which I visited in 1993, no, 1992 or 3. Anyway, when I went to India, it was one of the first places I went to. Was the grounds of Ajar and the various buildings there that the Theosophists still occupy and conduct retreats at. There's a huge library there and a gigantic banyan tree as well. A must visit for anyone who does go to India. All right. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the day. We have a couple of minutes left if you want to make any more comments or questions. We'll have a break for an hour and a quarter. Is that correct, Inez?
Yes.
That will take us.
Seven.
Will take us to 1900. So a good chance for dinner or tea. Another. Thank you, Eric, in the chat there. And then we'll do the full moon meditation proper, following the global meditation that they conduct at places like Lucis Trust, for instance, that most people are familiar with. And so look forward to seeing you all then. And so we'll pause. I'll leave the screen open, Inez.
Okay. I'll stop
or maybe I'll stop the share, and then I'll upload another page later on.
Okay.
Oh no, we can leave. We'll leave it up. We'll leave this picture up here, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so I'll let you stop that and process that video. And thanks everyone for coming, and see you later on in an hour and a quarter.